Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1274 of the War News stream. And we got very big news today that Ukraine has launched the new Flamingo missile at Russia, sending the Russians into panic. We've also seen Poland declare a Russian drone provocation in their territory, and also the possible Putin-Zelensky meeting is falling apart right before our eyes. And we have very big news today, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear that 70 miles inside of the Republic of Poland, near to the small town of Osina, it appears that a Russian Federation Shahed 136 style drone has impacted the territory near to the village, causing 3 buildings to be severely damaged, with no casualties being caused as a result. We have been able to hear that the Polish Ministry of Defense has openly stated that it is a direct armed provocation by the Russian Federation and the NATO alliance at large. Outside of that news, we have also been able to hear that crippling fuel shortages continue to grip the Russian Federation, and now the fuel shortage has officially reached the Russian Federation itself, with the Primorsky Krai Oblast, home to the city of Vladivostok, now having to ration fuel, with some fuel stations being completely out of any type of gasoline or diesel, as we have been able to see cars and commercial trucks lining up at the pumps to be able to try and get access to any fuel resources. We've also been able to hear that this is even extended to the occupied region of Georgia of West Abkhazia. We have also been able to hear of major developments in news inside of Ukraine, as we've also been able to hear that the lost battalion of the 132nd Motorized Rifle Brigade has been pushed out of the town of Kucheriv Yar by the Fighting 93rd today, and has now been pushed into a valley 1 mile to the east and near to the town of Hrushke. It does appear that at this moment, the last stand of the lost battalion is being conducted, and it is expected that the remnants of the lost battalion will most likely be destroyed within the next 48 hours. We have also been able to hear significant developments violence around the world in terms of nuclear development, as the People's Republic of China now openly boasts a nuclear stockpile of 600 nuclear warheads, with the Republic of India also unveiling a brand new intermediate-range ballistic missile today, capable of reaching speeds of Mach 26 at its apogee. We have also been able to hear inside the Middle East that more unidentified explosions have occurred within the Islamic Republic of Iran, with an explosion occurring today near to the Tabriz airport, which is incredibly indicative and similar to the explosion that occurred on the complete opposite end of the country at the city of Mashhad, generally suggesting that Mossad operations are continuing in covert form throughout the Islamic Republic of Iran to target and destroy critical infrastructure and logistical bases of the Islamic Republic of Iran, so that way they'll have less of an ability to respond with air power in the upcoming continuation of the 12-day war. U.S. Special Forces were also successful in a surprise attack last night, flying helicopters from Turkey through Aleppo and into Idlib. U.S. Special Forces landed near to a compound that held the next leader of the ISIS cells within the region of the Syrian interim government, and were successful in executing their operation, killing the upcoming leader and thus generally avoiding that specific individual becoming the leader of ISIS. He will now be replaced by the rat we saw on video last night. We have also been able to hear that the Israelis are continuing their airstrikes against Hezbollah forces within southern Lebanon, as the Israeli armed forces are also driving forward their offensive in the Gaza Strip simultaneously. We have also been able to hear of unreported explosions around the area of the Osina government, which it's unclear at the moment what the explosions are being caused by or what is actually being hit on the ground, but explosions are occurring nonetheless, and we are still trying to get information on that, even live on air at this moment. In the meantime, the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to hold their lines on most of the front line today, and we have also been able to hear the rumored use for the first time of the Flamingo cruise missile, which purportedly hit the Novoshitinsk oil refinery near to the area of the Rostov-on-Don Ukrainian border. We have a large amount of massive news to cover over the past 24 hours. Very, very significant news, mind you all. And we'll be making sure to get into each and every single bit of the major news that we have been able to get over the course of the night. And so moving on from that and into the Republic of Poland and near to the small village of Osina, which apparently is the correct pronunciation, we have been able to hear of a somewhat significant development within this area. But before we actually speak about the development, I want to lay out a little bit of the land, I guess you could say, that actually exists around this area. This is the city of Lublin, which is one of the largest cities within this area of southeastern Poland. The city is incredibly significant as an economic, cultural, and historic center for the Republic of Poland, and not only that, is the largest city, mind you all, that actually exists this close to the area of the Ukrainian border. The only city of a similar size, at least within southeastern Poland, would be the city of Krakow. Nevertheless, just a couple of miles south of Lublin, around this area of the bend in the highway, you can actually see this tiny little village. It is the smallest one of Osina. This is Osina, right here, this little village. It has probably about 100 or so people living in it. It is a wildly small village. As a matter of fact, it appears that its post office is actually consolidated with the larger villages surrounding it. It is that small. But nevertheless, over the night, it has pretty much gotten to international notoriety. 70 miles inside of the country, this village sat completely dormant and inactive over the course of the night. The only thing that was probably active in this area was the S19 highway heading into the major city of Lublin. In the midst of the night, an explosion occurred, and it generally shook the entire surrounding area, and apparently the explosion was large enough and loud enough that it could be heard from the surrounding villages. And to fast forward to the security footage that we had from the city, or more so village of Osina, here it is. That is an explosion. And you can actually hear it right there. From what
that thing must have been carrying some serious munitions, too. That was a very loud explosion. It's a shame it happened at night. You really couldn't see it, but that was massive based on the sound of it.
From what we can tell, based off of all the information that we have, this was guaranteed, and we'll get into that in a second, a Shahed 136 style kamikaze drone from the Russian Federation that flew 70 miles into the Republic of Poland's territory, exploding directly onto the village of Osina itself. Once again, I want to remind y'all that this village is wildly small. As a matter of fact, it hardly even shows up on Google Maps. And there are actually about 10 different villages named Osina in the entirety of the Republic of Poland, a lot of them around this area. So this was an incredibly difficult village to find, but this is the correct Osina. What is most interesting about this is that when the drone exploded, it exploded so close to the village that we have actually been able to hear that 3 buildings were significantly damaged as a result of this explosion, and we were then able to see the Polish authorities of the Polish police and armed forces began to arrive immediately, cordoning off the area and conducting an official investigation into the matter. We can actually see some footage of the Polish response in this clip. That is a
nice
Polish
helicopter. Also, isn't it quite wild as well that even though NATO allegedly has the best air defenses in the world, that nobody caught this drone coming in? It would seem like they would have caught this thing coming in, tried to shoot it down, or at least maybe found it beforehand. The fact that they had to wait and then investigate it tells you, honestly, quite a lot, that there might be some blind spots in Syria that maybe the Russian drones can get through without Poland actually seeing it.
I'd have to say it is a fairly interesting sort of a thing that it was able to make it in this far, and it does appear that at least at the moment, this is a fairly major development, to say the least. We can see Polish police walking around the surrounding cornfields near to the village as the military officials conduct their investigation beyond the cordon. We were able to hear that later in the day, just hours after this incident had occurred, that the Polish Ministry of Defense has openly stated, according to the Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, that the Russian Federation has conducted a direct armed provocation of the NATO alliance after officials reported that an object, possibly a Russian version of the Shahed drone, landed overnight in a cornfield in eastern Poland. This is the only armed explosion of a Russian drone that has been seen in the entirety of the war in Ukraine. This is actually the first time ever, and I want to make this incredibly clear, that a Russian drone has exploded inside the Republic of Poland. There have been other Russian drones that have technically exploded on NATO territory, as many of y'all will know of the infamous several-week streak of Russian drones that were attempting to attack the towns of Izmail and Renai along the Danube River, would sometimes, quote-unquote, stray off their path and would end up exploding on the other side of the river inside of Romanian territory, which is technically under NATO common defense jurisdiction. This is something that is, once again, pretty wild. Poland, to put this out there to all of y'all, is the largest armed force in the NATO alliance in Europe right now, outside of the United States of America, which is the largest armed force in the whole of NATO. The fact that this drone not only didn't just fly right across a river and exploded on a berm or a bank on the other side of the river, but flew 70 miles into the Republic of Poland and exploded near to a major city, once again, this was only several miles away from the major city of Lublin, is a fairly major development. Also on top of that, as far as the escalatory situation in this matter, every drone that has ever penetrated the airspace of Latvia or Lithuania have all been unarmed drones. Some of them have been of the Shahed 136 variety, but none of them, absolutely none, were armed. This is something that is a huge change, and it's coming in the middle of some significant developments. One, the attempt by the West to get the Russians into peace talks with the Ukrainians, and two, it is also coming up right ahead of the Russian Zapad 2025 military exercises, which will be taking place directly along Poland's northeastern border. All of this is setting a scene for this to be a fairly escalatory sort of an action by the Russian Federation, and it already appears that the Republic of Poland is stating that this is a direct armed provocation by the Russian Federation against their national sovereignty and the safety of their citizenry within the nation. It does appear that a lot of people have been throwing in their comments on this matter at the moment. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so obviously this Russian drone went all the way from Ukraine, fired by Russia, of course, and all the way into Poland, about 110 kilometers into Polish territory, which is not a small distance. That's pretty far into Polish territory, and now the Polish have declared a provocation officially, and they call it a NATO provocation as a whole. So what are your thoughts on that issue? So 61% said NATO will ignore the provocation, while 20% said NATO will act on the provocation, and 12% said Russia will probably fire another one very, very soon. Now, here's my thing. My whole stance on this the entire time has been that if Russia fires any type of munition or any weapon into NATO territory, that should be dealt with extremely severely and extremely swiftly, because Russia always has the chance to at least come out publicly and say that it was an accident, and so far we've not heard anything from the Russians about this being an accident. So considering the length that it went into Poland, also the silence from the Russians, and how serious this is with it striking one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine, which is Poland, I would say this looks intentional. This does does not look accidental to me. And if it is an accident, then why didn't Russia simply say that? So I'm definitely 100% with Poland. It seems like a NATO provocation as a whole. They're probably probing air defenses, and that's very concerning in the midst of all this other developments with the diplomatic stuff between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. So overall, though, what is NATO going to do? That's a tough one because so far NATO's had a track record of ignoring these type of provocations and generally not doing much about it. But I'm going to be with a 60%. I think largely NATO will try to ignore this first one, but if it happens again, like we've seen in Estonia, Latvia, etc., then it could force a NATO response. But I'm with the 60%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'd also be with the 60% as well. I do believe that NATO is most likely going to ignore the provocation, as this also came, although I was not able to include this on our map tonight due to a complete overload in the amount of news that we had. This is also coming on the fact that the Republic of Poland has now stated that they will not be sending armed peacekeepers into Ukraine post-conflict, or will even entertain the idea. So it does appear that the Republic of Poland itself isn't really that amped to face down the Russian Federation, even if the Russian Federation, as we can already tell, is an economically aging military apparatus, and the best explanation that we can make it. But beyond that, it does appear that there will not be a larger NATO provocation or NATO reaction as a result of this provocation by the Russian Federation, but it does appear that this is one that is the largest that we've seen so far. A Shahed 136 style drone carries a massive warhead. The thing's huge. It's equivalent to about a 500-pound bomb landing near to this village and exploding when it made impact in that cornfield. It was close enough that it actually damaged significantly 3 buildings within that village. And once again, to remind you all, just going down here and trying to find this village that pretty much is so insignificant it doesn't even hardly show up on the map. So let me see if I can find it again. Because this thing, I'm not going to lie, this thing is extremely tough. I have to zoom into like the max distance to be able to find the thing. So it should be somewhere around here, and I'm still not finding this thing. Like, this is an elusive town. I'm not going to try and keep finding it though, so that way we don't sit here on air all night going, where the hell is it? Where did it go? But this town is incredibly small. There's hardly anyone living in it, maybe 130 people at best. For it to have landed so close to the village, it destroyed, well, not destroyed, but heavily damaged 3 of the buildings within the village, and luckily didn't create any wounded or killed as a result, is something that tells us this is a wildly dangerous situation. The Russian Federation has a general responsibility, given the fact that it is in an armed conflict, to ensure that its munitions do not cross the sovereign borders of the state of Ukraine into foreign nations. They are technically at war with the state of Ukraine. They are not at war with Poland, and they are not at war with Romania either. Yet we have seen that Russian munitions have continuously fallen and exploded on the other side of the border, possibly resulting in the potential to create casualties or fatalities as a result of that sort of action. This is something that has to be responded to, in my opinion. I generally do think that NATO will not respond, but this sort of a situation is one that we do not want to generally ignore or turn a blind eye to, especially considering that the Zapad 2025 military exercises are just around the corner, quite literally only a few weeks away, and this military exercise in northwestern Belarus is going to be the largest military exercise of its kind conducted on the Polish border since the beginning of the creation of the Zapad 2025, or the Zapad exercises as a whole. That is something that's incredibly concerning. This is giving the Russians a general idea, at least for now. They can land a drone with an explosive on it. First off, they can get it 70 miles into Poland, which is a pretty decent distance when you think about it. They can get it 70 miles into Poland undetected. It will explode on their territory, and the Polish reaction, and NATO's reaction as a whole, is generally moot. There's hardly any. That's telling them they probably would have a pretty decent chance at a first strike against Poland and NATO if they wanted to, and they could most likely capture and secure the Suwalki Gap before any sort of a large, concerted defensive response was made by either Lithuania or Poland, or any other NATO states for that matter, that would get involved in the defense of the Suwalki Gap. That's something that's starting to become a little bit clear, and that's something, once again, that's becoming incredibly concerning. Also, the fact of the matter is that we have heard no statements by the Polish Ministry of Defense, or for that matter, NATO or any other nation in NATO, that they are going to be countering the Russian buildup near Grodno with a buildup of our own somewhere around the Suwalki Gap area in a war game of our own design. There's been no response. So this force that's going to be about 130,000 strong is right on the Polish border, right at the most critical choke point of the alliance. and there's nobody there to respond in case if they actually do try and conduct an attack. It will take most likely days for an actual effective defensive force to be built up in that area to even create a screen, which generally just harasses them as they advance, but not a blocking force that completely stops them. That's something that's incredibly concerning, and the fact that we're generally turning a blind eye, Poland and NATO as a whole, beyond them stating it's an armed provocation, to this attack, that's something that is generally setting off a decent amount of alarm bells and may actually encourage the Russian Federation to take even more rash actions. But still,
I would personally say the bigger alarm bell here is Poland is not really providing too many details about how this drone got through their air defenses and made it all the way that far into their territory. To me, that's the more concerning part, because obviously these drones are flying low, so it may get past their radar detection like in the initial phase. But the fact that it was able to fly 110 kilometers, about 70 miles or so, into Polish territory without any type of response from Poland whatsoever, that to me is extremely concerning, because it tells us that we either have a massive blind spot when it comes to drones attacking NATO countries, or maybe Poland decided to let it fly in and then let it hit. And I don't know why they would do that, because that doesn't really make much sense. It could have gone to a populated area and actually hurt civilians. So that's the question that I want answered personally. Was this an intentional oversight by Poland and they let it fly in, or was it something that they didn't even know entered their territory until they heard reports from civilians on the ground reporting this explosion from the Shahed? That's what we don't know.
Well, actually, I actually can give you a little bit of an answer to that. Shahed 136 style drones have a specific kind of a radio receiver in them that requires them to fly at a somewhat higher altitude. We've seen throughout the entirety of the war in Ukraine, Shahed 136 drones have been seen at altitudes in excess of 1,000 feet, and most radars have a ground cover sort of a clearance of about several hundred feet, meaning that they can see things that are generally above 300 to 500 feet or higher, meaning that this drone would have been at the lower threshold of a radar's detection ability, almost at one of the lowest altitudes, but still would have been detectable nonetheless. That's how the Ukrainians are able to detect most of these Shahed 136 drones when they're flying into Ukraine and coordinate air defense to effectively engage and shoot down the large majority of these drones during every Russian drone attack. If this drone had dropped below a level less than 500 feet or 300 feet, we generally would assume that the drone would be uncontrollable over that period of flight, considering that the drone flies at a speed of roughly about 70 to 80 miles per hour. It would have been an entire hour's worth of transit time for this drone to have flown over the Ukrainian border and then into the area around Lublin to impact the site, meaning that this drone was in flight over Polish airspace for an entire hour, technically well within radar coverage range, and apparently was not really detected or any alarms were set off to be able to try and coordinate any sort of defense efforts to either shoot down the drone or at least observe it and possibly try and evacuate people who are in the way. So from generally what we know,
I just don't know how that could be, though, because these drones obviously have a radar signature. It's not like your average radar signature, so they can probably tell that it is a unique drone of some sort. And obviously, the direction, the angle of attack was coming from Ukraine, and it was in the midst of a drone attack that Russia was performing on Ukraine. So the Polish are always well aware when Russia launches those attacks, because they usually send up their F-16s to patrol near the border. So it makes you wonder, why was Poland caught lacking like this? Because when they send their F-16s up, the whole point of doing that is to shoot down any Russian drones that might accidentally come into Polish airspace. But this time, I didn't see any reports of the F-16s actually on patrol. And also, obviously, the drone didn't get shot down either. So their air defense didn't do their job either. So it seemed like a multi-level failure on Poland's part not to shoot that down, which makes me ask some questions here about what is really the case with this. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, but it seems a little bit weird on its face, which makes me want to have some questions answered. But also, by the way, I did see that NISA in the live chat said, is it possible that Poland ignored it so they don't reveal their capabilities? And I would say that probably wouldn't make too much sense. You'd probably want to shoot it down so that way Russia would know that's well protected, but maybe they didn't want to expose where their air defense launchers are. Maybe that's possible, but Enforcer, what do you think?
It wouldn't make any sense, and I see a lot of people saying that it's best for Poland not to fire to give away their positions. But the thing about that, however, is that all modern air defense systems are built with the concept of mobility. Modern battlefields entirely revolve around the aspect of maneuverability. So So if you have a fixed in place air defense position, it's completely pointless. Like it's absolutely pointless. That's why no one uses them anymore. It's a death trap. And also on top of that, it's a significant expense for that thing to fire once. Immediately everyone knows where it is, and then they slam it with rocket artillery or something else that it cannot intercept. So it's completely useless for the large part. It wouldn't make a lot of sense because they wanted to shoot it down. This isn't really a populated area, at least the area that it flew in. And also to give you all a lot of additional information that I was able to try and sleuth throughout the course of the day, I was able to find that apparently this drone was launched from somewhere around the city of Mazir inside of Belarus, as we generally see a little stream of Shahed 136s come out of this area during every attack. It flew down into Ukraine, and then it hooked a right turn over Korostin, flew through the woods of northern Ukraine, and then when it was getting up to the area of Lutsk and Rivne, it was supposed to have taken a left turn over this area to start heading south to try and attempt a hit on Lutsk, Lviv, or other major cities within this area. But apparently the drone did not make that decisive left turn that usually is seen in these sorts of attack patterns, and instead continued to fly generally in a straight line directly south of Lublin through the pretty much unpopulated regions of the farmland south of the city, flew 70 miles through Poland. It was about an hour's flight time at that point, and then landed and exploded near to the town of Osina. So for some people who were saying maybe this came from Belarus, technically its launch and origin point did come from Belarus, but when it actually crossed the Polish border, it had crossed the Polish border from Ukraine's border, not from Belarus's. So that generally is another important fact to add into this matter. There is supposed to be, at least according to Polish Ministry of Defense statements, an air defense perimeter that it works off of radar systems within this area that will be able to triangulate the location of these drones and possibly shoot them down if they pose a threat. There also is the fact that the Polish armed forces' main responsibility, like any armed force, is to protect the nation and its citizenry from armed attack. This drone is armed. Any drone that is flying inside of Ukrainian airspace during the midst of Ukrainian drone attack is generally assumed to always be armed. And that's also how the Republic of Poland responds to these sorts of incidents, is the assumption that they are always armed and pose an imminent threat or danger to civilians on the ground. In that sort of a situation, it will always make far more sense to shoot down the drone, even if it is over a populated area, than it is to let it continue on freely and then hit whatever it wants to hit. Who's to say that that drone wasn't going to fly directly into a populated urban center and slam into an apartment block and end up possibly killing several people or wounding dozens? That could not be thrown out of the question. Nobody knows where that drone is going while it's in flight. Only the drone operator knows where it's actually heading. And the fact that it flew for an entire hour through Polish airspace also shows us that this drone was not running astray. Most drones that run astray do not fly in a straight line for 70 straight miles. They usually run out of control within less than a mile. So this drone was well under the control of an operator for about an entire hour, and they flew it in a straight line directly into Poland 70 miles in. So all of that together, it's something that is quite concerning.
Also, by the way, I see some people, a lot of people are bringing this up. I'm not going to say it's wrong right off the bat, because I will say there's so many different failures on the Polish defense that I do have some questions myself, but I wouldn't go as far as to say that Poland intentionally let the drone through. I would say that's jumping to too much of a conclusion right there. But some people are saying, like Jay Swaggle, they said, I feel like they were watching the drone, the Russian drone, to see where it was actually going to go and what it was going to do. That is possible that maybe they were going to do that and maybe shoot it down right before it got to a populated area. But at the same time, though, that's very risky because there's no guarantee that there will be air defense in the area that the drone was going to actually end up impacting. So I doubt they would do that just for the sake of the protection of their civilian populations. That way they didn't have any casualties, but it is possible. Some people are also suggesting that maybe Poland let it through at the border and saw it the entire time and simply let it crash on their territory, so that way they can have a reason to say that maybe Putin wasn't serious about peace. Once again, not really enough evidence to say that is the case, but I would say you can't rule that out necessarily. But right now it's really hard to tell.
I would have to say, generally, from what I know, it's from what we can tell, this appears to be a direct armed provocation, a lot like the Polish Ministry of Defense has already made statement of. They weren't trying to let the drone through. And also another thing that I do have to say, folks, is that armed forces are subject to failure. Like, an armed force is not an infallible group. Like, they're a group of people, like anyone. They can make errors or failures. Like, for example, the fire that broke out on the USS New Orleans today off of the coast of Japan, which unfortunately we covered in the short ore video today, but I had to cut from this stream stream because we have so much to talk about, and it was a more minor development because we didn't hear of any casualties. So we cut it out. But still, that fire on the USS New Orleans, which is one of the largest amphibious support vessels that we have in the Navy, was generally an accident. So, of course, there can be errors and flaws within the system. And the fact of the matter is that this is most likely an error, that the Polish did not end up catching the fact that this drone was flying through their airspace for an entire hour and ended up almost blitzing a couple of people living in Osina. That's most likely what happened. But this is still quite concerning because this, at this moment, is showing that Polish air defense isn't 100% resolute, at least within the Ukrainian border area, and on top of that, the Russian Federation may have actually been attempting to probe Polish air defenses and see how far they could get in before it was shot down or intercepted. And right now, the answer to that was nobody intercepted them. It made it in 70 miles, but nobody even knew it was there until it blew up. So how much further could the next Russian drone make it into Poland? Could it make it all the way to Warsaw, or could it make it to a city like Lodz, or even further in, like Krakow? Possibly. That's a serious consideration to be put on the books. That is a very concerning sort of a development, and one that I think there has to be some sort of a larger response to, especially considering that this is just weeks ahead, and I want to make this incredibly clear, weeks ahead of the largest war game that is to be conducted in Eastern Europe, except for the one the Russians claimed they were conducting before the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, which is the Zapad 2025 military exercise. That is also incredibly concerning considering the time frame that this happened in. So with that, I hope
also, real quick, before we jump off this topic and move on to our next one, because we've got a lot of news to cover. I see a lot of people actually buying into the idea that maybe Poland is playing the victim. I see LC39A saying that as well. I will admit, it's a possibility. I would say on the scale, though, of possibilities, it's probably on the lower end, but maybe Poland's doing that for a reason. Maybe they let it through, but I would probably lean more towards the idea that it was probably maybe not caught in time. Maybe it just went through because the radar didn't pick it up or something. It's kind of hard to believe there's such a wide blind spot like that, but it is possible because no military is perfect, like the enforcer was saying. So maybe it's the case, but once again, it's like Poland has some really high-tech equipment. They have like very potent radars. They have the Aegis Ashore system, which isn't necessarily for detecting ground threats like that or closer to the ground. It's more for ballistic missile interception, but I don't know. Like, to me, it seems a little bit odd. I want some more information before we really jump to that conclusion, I would say.
But these are also, by the way, folks, these are the systems that they have for air defense. They have the Mala, they have the Popred right here. This is generally just a Stinger truck, is the best way to describe it, or a Piorin truck, technically. They also have the OSA, which is a Soviet-era air defense system. These things are kind of rough. And they also have some Kubes. All of them are mobile. None of them are stuck in position. So if they fire, they just simply move after they fire, so that way they don't get hit. So saying that they didn't fire to not reveal their positions generally wouldn't stand up to theory, because it's not like these vehicles could just pack up and move, like the normal sort of shoot and scoot doctrine that a NATO country would emphasize in their maneuverability doctrine, which is something that every NATO country has, is the idea that once you fire a couple of rounds, you need to move, because sitting in the same spot, you're begging to get slammed by an attack of some kind that will knock out your vehicle or literally kill you. So generally, it wouldn't stand up to scrutiny that they wouldn't fire and shoot this thing down if they saw it, because shooting it down and having the explosive blow up in air, even if there is falling debris, is far less threatening to anyone on the ground than letting that drone impact intact and allowing its warhead to explode on impact with the ground. That will always produce far more damage than just shooting it down in air. The Ukrainians are clear proof of that. They don't ever let a drone continue to keep flying through their airspace, even if it is over a populated area. They will still shoot it down, because that is generally, as far as risk assessments are concerned, to be a safer action than letting the drone continue to press on to its target. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news for the night, as we have been able to hear of other significant developments outside of the Republic of Poland, as we have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation's fuel shortage crisis is beginning to worsen even grander. It's getting far worse, far faster than anticipated. We actually believed that this would take several months to get to this point, but we are already seeing that the occupied territories are completely lacking of any fuel products, including diesel, for commercial trucks. This is actually a video that was taken within the occupied territories near to the area of the Zaporizhia Oblast and also the Donetsk Oblast, showing a queue of Russian supply trucks waiting to be able to get into a single gas station to get some diesel fuel for their trucks. It goes on forever.
Jeez. That's crazy, honestly. That spread from just the normal gasoline to diesel that quick too. It's really becoming. This is really spreading rapidly, like spreading a lot more rapidly than I thought. So this could be something here that Russia needs some external help to solve.
This is pretty extreme, actually. This is about as extreme as fuel shortages get. So to lay it out there for all of y'all, in terms of commercial grade fuels used for roadways, there are really only two types: gasoline and diesel. Pretty much around the world, that is the standard. Right now in the occupied territories, they are completely out of all gasoline types of octane grades and also diesel. So that means that the occupied territories are now completely devoid of any fuel of any type that is not directly within governmental control, meaning that all commercial sectors in the occupied territories are grinding to a halt effectively today. There is no way to transport goods that are produced, or to transport raw materials to produce further goods, or to even be able to bring basic retail goods like food, clothing, and such things, basic necessities, to the stores within the occupied territories, because there's no way to get a vehicle in or to get it out because there's no longer any fuel. Not only that, but it's already spread as well to another extremity of the Russian Federation, another occupied territory, West Abkhazia, as we were also able to see video footage from West Abkhazia, known for its exports to Russia of tangerines, which is actually their major economic good. They are also suffering from significant fuel shortages as well today, and their shortage appears to be only based in gasolines of different octane grades, but it has not passed over into diesel fuels yet like it has in the occupied territories of Ukraine.
Look at that. They're only selling the gas by coupon. This day. You got to have a special coupon to get gas in Russia.
I mean, look at that. That is quite truly, man, like the 1973 oil crisis back in the day. You remember that, Matthew, where everyone in America was lining up for fuel and it was this huge issue? It's like that, but this is actually starting to get a lot worse, because right now, from what we're hearing, from everything that's coming out of Russia, the Russians are bleeding about 1 million barrels of usable fuel products per day. That is huge. Well, I don't really think any strategic fuel reserve could have kept up with that strain for that long. And considering that the Russians have already been running a several 100,000 barrel of fuel deficit per day for years, at least at a minimum, this is starting to take its toll on the Russian Federation's fuel storage and operation capabilities. Not only that, but officially today, not only is it affecting occupied regions of the Russian Federation, like occupied Ukraine or West Abkhazia and Georgia, it is now affecting, officially, the first part of the mainland of the Russian Federation, all the way off in the Far East. So this is giving us a little bit of an idea of what this is going to look like. Primorsky Krai, which is the oblast that has the city of Vladivostok inside of it, it's one of the more significant ones within this area, is completely out of fuel as well, at least most gasolines. And we can see that in this clip right here. This is a little bit of a lengthy one, but I'm going to mute the audio and just let y'all watch the queue for the gas. But from what we understand, fuel is now starting to run out within the far east of the Russian Federation, near to Vladivostok. From what we can tell based off of the patterns, it appears that the Russian Federation has actually been able to foresee that this fuel shortage is occurring and has prioritized Western Russia to be able to receive the most of their fuel reserves, while pretty much cutting off their extremities like occupied territories in West Abkhazia and Ukraine, and also the Far East, where there's far less economic activity, like the Primorsky Krai Oblast, from any sort of fuel access. This means that the Russians...
Man, that's a shocker, honestly. You're telling me that the Russians prioritize the oligarchs and the high-class elite of Russian society to get fuel? That's a shocker there.
Why would that shock you? It's completely natural. What? Are you some kind of a comedian, or are you a clown? Anyways, as I was saying, gasoline is a very important thing. People always thought that oil was completely useless except for lighting kerosene light. And then you go on like a 9-hour-long Putin rant. But beyond that, this is absolutely crazy to see. But it does appear that the Russian Federation is going to be prioritizing the Western Russian Federation region for the remainder of the fuel reserves for as long as they last. But we have a feeling at this point, based off of how rapidly this is spiraling out of control, that most of the regions east of the Urals are going to be completely devoid of any fuel access, most likely within the next few weeks. It already appears that it's reaching Krasnodar Krai, and based off of the examples that we have within the occupied territories, that means that within about 3 days, Krasnodar Krai, Primorsky Krai Oblast, will actually be without fuel of all types, gasoline and diesel, over the next 3 days or so. So it'll be completely out by then, if we're going off of the example of the Ukrainian occupied territories. It also appears, as another extension, that considering that gasoline is now becoming incredibly short supply as well as diesel, the Russian Federation is going to start relying on their weak point, at least for now, a lot heavier. Remember how I went into that whole monologue yesterday about how 70% of Russian cargo over land is moved by trains and only 30% is moved by trucks? So here's something interesting for all of y'all to think about. This is very interesting. 1 gallon of gasoline will move 1 ton of freight by truck, Matthew. How far? Like in terms of miles, how far do you think 1 gallon of gasoline will take 1 ton of goods on a truck?
I would assume probably what, 15 miles or something, depending on the truck.
135 miles.
Oh wow.
So how many miles do you think 1 gallon of gas will take you on the railroads for 1 ton of freight being moved?
Honestly, no clue.
500 miles.
Oh wow.
So the Russian Federation, considering that they are running out of fuel at this point, are going to not have to find generally ways to conserve fuel because they like trees. They're going to have to find a way to save fuel because they're running out of it. So what they're going to do is that they're going to start leaning even heavier onto the Russian railroads, which are already pretty much at maximum capacity at this point, which is a big issue in itself. But they're also going to have to be leaning on because they just don't have the excess fuel to waste moving everything around by truck because it's largely inefficient compared to the railroads. Railroads are generally 4 times more efficient in fuel consumption per ton of freight moved than trucks are generally. So the Russian Federation will have to lean even heavier onto the railroads, which means that the Ukrainian attacks that have been going on Russian mainline railroads, which you can actually see outlined here around Ukraine, are going to be even more damaging because most likely here in the future, 85% or 90% of all freight moved in the Russian Federation, including military freight, will be moved entirely by rail, meaning that attacking these main lines has even more significance to the Russian Federation's logistical situation inside of Ukraine. It's going to end up being
that's how they're going to deal with it in the short term, though. But how are they going to address the root problem? Because from what I can tell, it looks like Russia's having this fuel shortage because Ukraine has done such a good job at hitting all the fuel depots and also striking refineries that Russia has gotten behind in refining enough oil and gas to actually put this in the gas stations. So that appears to be what's holding Russia back right now. It's creating the fuel shortage. So Ukraine has not lit up. In fact, Ukraine is attacking more refineries and they're going harder on the oil depots and things like that Russia has across their region. So it makes you wonder how they're going to solve it, because right now Russia is selling more and more oil and petroleum products to India and selling it to India at a massive discount to try to incentivize India to buy more oil and petroleum. So maybe the Russians are going to try to have India resell maybe refined petroleum products back to Russia, so that way they can try to solve it. But even at that, though, Ukraine is striking all of Russia's fuel depots. Anywhere they're storing fuel, they're striking it. They're hitting it hard.
Also, really quickly, I would have to agree with that, but also I see a lot of people saying the math is way off. I did a decent amount of research on that earlier today to see and to explain really quickly. No, you are not going to be moving an entire, you're not going to be moving an entire railroad train, with several dozen cars behind it, 500 miles on 1 gallon of gas. That is 1 gallon of gas to move 1 ton of freight 500 miles. And generally, that is apparently, from what I could find statistically today, how transportation efficiency in terms of fuel consumption is measured. And those were the numbers put out from what I could tell by the U.S. Department of Transportation. So working off of the American fuel consumption figures for the railroads versus the trucks get about 135 miles per gallon of 1 ton of freight. You also have to keep in mind that generally a single 18-wheeler is moving about 50 to 60 tons of freight per trailer. If you're working with a fully loaded trailer, that would be a fairly decent number to work off of. So obviously you're not getting a gallon of gas consumed per every 135 miles. It's a lot more than that, but you are transporting way more than 1 ton. As far as the railroads go, to explain why that is the case, that they are way much more efficient in fuel consumption, you have one engine on an 18-wheeler that is moving 60 tons of freight. That one engine, at least when we speak about it from an economy of scale perspective, is actually heavily inefficient in terms of fuel consumption. It is one engine consuming a normal amount of fuel for its size and type to move about 60 tons of freight alone. That's it. Then the railroads, on the other hand, you're able to have 2 larger engines, or how many others you want. Railroads operate modularly, so you can pack as many engines as you want together. But you can also attach as many rail cars behind them as you'd like. So you could move let's say on an intermodal train, let me go show you all that really quickly, because this is something important to speak about as far as national logistics are concerned. As far as intermodal freight, which are the double stacked well car containers, you are actually carrying per rail car 2 18-wheeler loads of freight. These containers are technically 40 feet long, different than the 53-foot long standard American trailer that you see on most trucks, but generally this is still one truckload of freight. A single train can move, at least at a minimum, about 180 18-wheelers worth of freight with possibly 3 lead engines, meaning that it has 3 running engines at the head of the train. Also, considering that they are running on rails, there is far less friction between the train and the roadbed than you would have with a truck, which is operating on rubber wheels on a concrete road. That means that fuel efficiency is a lot higher for that reason as well, meaning that you're able to get absolutely ludicrous fuel efficiency per ton of freight moved on the railroads than you do by truck. That's actually something that's been known incredibly commonly, and that's also why you would see in America, if you look at the logistics side of things on how this nation works, that the railroads are the primary mover of most heavy aggregates like coal, intermodal shipping, things that have to be done in mass, because in terms of the economy of scale, it's a lot cheaper and easier to move all of this by rail than it would be to have an 18-wheeler take every single one of these containers and move them across the country, not just for fuel costs, but also for crew upkeep costs of roadbeds, such things like that. Railroads are generally a lot cheaper for large masses of cargo. But still.
And also, by the way, the semi trucks, by the way, do not get. I'm not sure if you said miles per gallon earlier, but a semi truck, for based on what I know, it looks like they usually get about 7 to 8 miles a gallon for the typical 18-wheeler semi truck. So much lower with the MPG on that one. So very, very, what you could say inefficient, but it's carrying quite a bit. So I guess you could say it makes up for it slightly. But anyways, unfortunately, back to the main thing, back to the main problem here, how Russia's going to solve this whole situation. What do you think they're going to do? Repurchase refined petroleum from India after they've sold it to them, so that way they can try to replenish their very, very low gas supplies? Or what is Russia going to do to solve the problem?
Generally, there's actually nothing that they can do to solve the problem. That's kind of the apocalyptic sort of an outcome to this whole thing. They can try and limit the impact, at least for now, but eventually this fuel shortage, if nothing changes for now, and the Ukrainians are able to keep at least a quarter of Russian oil refineries out of operation, they will eventually run out of fuel almost completely. It's going to be a similar sort of scenario in late war Russia that it was in late war Nazi Germany, because actually by the end of the war in World War II, around the latter part in 1943, 1944, and 1945, Germany was actually suffering significant fuel shortages to the point that they had to start researching alternative types of fuel to operate most of their vehicles with, because basic petroleum fuels were no longer available in large enough amounts. So there generally is nothing that they can do, rather than try and conserve the fuel that they have left, pretty much cut out the entire civilian sector from using any fuel, and completely prioritize it for the military. That's about all that they could do in the end of the day. But if the Ukrainians keep striking these refineries, it's over for the Russians at this point. They're pretty much just ticking down the clock before the economy stops and the military stops, because there's no fuel to run any of it with.
I guess it's the good thing that Russia has like really fuel efficient vehicles. It's not by choice, by the way. It's because the Russians can't afford higher end performance vehicles, so they get the Ladas, they get things like that. Let's see what Lada gas mileage is. I'm just curious on that because they have very small engines. Let's see here. So Ladas are extremely fuel efficient. It looks like the little bitty Ladas. If you want to pull up a picture of that, unfortunately, you can show everybody what that little thing looks like. A very small little compact car. It gets about looks like 37 miles per gallon on average. So we're talking about some really good gas mileage right there on this thing right here. So it may look like it's like from Cuba or something, or from a really like a bygone era, but this thing right here is extremely fuel efficient. So I guess that works in their favor. And also, since most people in Russia really don't even have a car in rural places and things like that, they really don't need the gas in the first place. But for everybody else, though, that has to get to work and they actually do work in Russia, that's going to be a bit of a problem for them, and also mainly for the military. That's where the huge problem is going to be.
It's really a problem for everyone, because also this is something that a lot of people never think about, and this is a huge one. This is actually getting on into the kind of apocalyptic sort of a world, but this is actually a realistic sort of a scenario. If the fuel runs out that much, how in the world do they harvest crops? Everything in the modern agricultural world works off in an industrialized agricultural system. Hardly anything is ever harvested or even grown, for that matter, through direct manual labor. All of it is done by some sort of agricultural machinery, which requires fuel to be able to operate. So if there is no fuel, which North Korea is actually a great example of this, if there is no fuel and agriculture is entirely relegated to manual labor, crop yields plummet. The supply of food plummets. That means that the price of food rapidly skyrockets massively, and that also means that there may be a nationwide famine that could result from these significant fuel shortages. That is a huge sort of an apocalyptic scenario. More so than any other is the fact that there's no way to really harvest or grow large amounts of food due to the lack of mechanized agriculture, and also as a result of that, there is no way to even ship food products from the farms to food processing facilities and then to the stores for people to be able to buy it. So everything collapses at that point for the larger part because the state is now officially in a nationwide famine.
Yeah, it's crazy that we've been waiting a very long time to see when the actual impact of these oil refinery attacks were going to take place and when it was actually going to take effect. It seems like it's finally here. Like we're finally seeing the results of it. And I was wondering for a long time, when are we going to see like real world results? And we're finally seeing them now. And it's resulting in literally different octane levels going missing. Russians are handing out fuel coupons for people to go buy fuel. And also people were asking about that, by the way. That's what the Russians are doing. They're handing out like ration, cards or ration letters or something where you can get a certain amount of fuel, and it's only in certain areas. Some areas don't have fuel at all, so you can't even get it with a coupon. So it's spreading, and it's also obviously a massive ration issue. So I don't really see like a fix to it. I'm kind of with the enforcer on that. I really don't see an immediate fix unless they plan on having external help, maybe. But that's what the current poll's about, by the way.
But you know what's funny? There's no external help. There's nothing that can help them because nobody refines more fuel, at least in massive amounts, than they need, like in terms of gas and diesel, because that's what they have to import. If they import crude, it's as useless as anything else right now. They have no way to refine the crude into fuel. And China generally imports crude oil from everyone else because they don't meet their domestic consumption demands on a daily basis from their domestic fuel production or generally their domestic oil production. Neither does India. That's also why they import their oil products as well. So nobody can actually help out the Russians. If their refineries are knocked out, they're screwed. And right now, a quarter of their refineries are knocked out. And this fuel shortage is only going to get worse. And there's literally nobody that can help them at all. There's nobody in the world who can do it.
Seems very bad predicament for Russia. It seems like they should have probably ended the war sooner, it looks like. And also, another thing is with these peace talks going on, and peace talks in air quotes like always, it seems like maybe Putin would want to end this thing, considering that he's starting to have economic crises stacking up on him. He's having a gas crisis. And also, in some of the Russian-occupied areas, the water is blue. As y'all have seen coming out the tap, the water's not even properly filtered. So they're having so many crises, and also seems to be lining up at the exact same time that their buddies in Iran are having major humanitarian crisis as well with their water and issues like that as well. And also a huge stock market crash is happening in Iran. So it's a bad day for the Axis alliance. But I think, though, instead of the Axis alliance seeking out peace, this is actually probably going to be basically like prodding a pit bull. It's going to be having them get more aggressive toward the West, and they'll probably be acting out worse as a result. It's probably not going to lead to peace.
Hold up. Before we move on, I have to just add one more thing. The water is blue. But moving on from there.
It is. It is blue. Also, we have a poll on this, by the way.
Okay. So really quickly, folks, speaking of that Russian gas shortage, before we move on into the East Asian news, well, really the nuclear arms race news and also the Middle East news, what are y'all thinking about this fuel shortage that's currently gripping the Russian Federation? And what are you thinking about it as well, Matthew?
All right, so it looks like 41% said Russia will soon be crippled from this fuel crisis, while 30% said it indicates larger problems than just the gas issue, and 23% said Russia will solve with external help. And what this does indicate is while Putin has all the air defense, or literally surrounding his mansions are safe. The one thing that's not safe is the oil refineries and also the fuel refineries. Those are not safe, and they're getting struck in larger numbers than ever by Ukraine. And to me, it indicates that they cannot leave those unprotected any longer, because we're literally seeing the real world results right now. The fuel is out. Russia does not have fuel, and it's only going to get worse. This is not going to stay limited or isolated to Crimea or the areas where it's currently taking place. It's going to be an issue that is going to persist for quite some time. So I think Russia is probably going to seek external help. That's pretty much all they can do at this point. They're going to hope that maybe one of their allies, China, India, somebody, is maybe going to at least try to save them in some way or another, because they really have nowhere else to turn. They can't just say we're not going to solve it, because they've got to do something. And I think they'll look to an ally, but I'm not really sure if even an ally can help them at this point, but we'll have to see how it pans out. But Enforcer, what say you?
Russia is going to be crippled. I would be with the 41% completely. And there isn't even a hypothetical actually that anyone could help them out, because to help them out they would have to build new refineries to be able to produce gas or diesel for that matter to be able to import into Russia. And that building a refinery is not a simple process. That can take years. Even in a country like China with no environmental protection agencies to concern themselves about as far as the bureaucracy, it still takes years to build brand new refineries. And they would be building a refinery for a short-term problem, so significant upfront investment to produce gas to sell to Russia, which is a huge investment that they'll never return on, because either the war is going to end or Russia is going to collapse before they ever get a return on that investment of building new refineries. Because China only has a very minimal, it's like, I believe it's something like 100,000 or 150,000 barrel of usable fuel product surplus per day at this point, so that way they can build up a strategic fuel reserve just in case if they need to start massively consuming fuel for a short period of time in an emergency. But they don't have enough to just ship to the Russians every single day. I mean, even if they took that 150,000 surplus that they're having right now and they put it all towards the Russians are still at an 850,000 barrel deficit today. Then that means they have to go to the Indians. The Indians might be able to chip in another 75, 100,000 barrels. Now they're down to 750. They are still hemorrhaging fuel products every single day. Diesel, gas, and every other type combined. There's actually no way anyone in the world can help the Russians right now. They are quite truly ticking down time to where Russia grinds to an actual stop because they do not have fuel to function with. It's crazy, actually. I never thought we would see this day. We've always been talking about it for years. As the Ukrainians have been attacking these refineries, it's finally actually happening in real time. But with that, I hope that doesn't...
Why does it feel so unsatisfying for some reason? Like, it's finally here, and it feels like it's not as climatic as I thought it was going to be. I think because we really haven't seen a full collapse from this fuel shortage yet. But it seems like it's not as like a big boom like we were expecting when it finally hit. I think we've waited for such a long time for it that we've kind of gotten, I guess you could say, kind of desensitized to this whole situation. But once we see like this thing really take its full course, I think we're going to see some civil unrest maybe breaking out in Russia because of it. So we might maybe see a bit of a climactic end to things then. But for right now, though, it feels like a little bit of like a bittersweet moment. Like, is it actually going to go somewhere or what? But I guess we'll find out soon.
Honestly, it feels like the beginning of the end in my mind. I'm like, my God, this is going to be the end of everything for them. Like, if they can't make fuel, it's over. Like that's what the Allies actually knew in World War II. I think and someone can tell me who made this quote, but in World War II, someone said if we had just hit the Nazis' oil refineries within the first few months, the whole thing would have been over, because they wouldn't have been able to fight. And that's generally what we're looking at right now. Like, and we've been talking about this for years, folks. We've been like, the fuel shortages, they're coming. They're coming around the corner. They're hitting the refineries. They're now running into a deficit. This deficit's eating into the strategic reserves. We don't know how big the strategic reserves really are, and we don't know how long they'll last, but eventually at this rate, they'll have to run out. And it's finally actually happening. Occupied territories are running out of fuel, and now the Far East is running out of fuel. So it's now actually starting to happen. Like, as far as in my mind, Matthew, if you've ever seen the game Frostpunk, and some people might know what I'm mentioning, at the end of the game in Frostpunk, when they're like, oh my God, the mega storm that's going to freeze everyone to death is coming, we have to get ready or everyone's going to end up pretty much dying in the frost. That's what this feels like right now for the Russians. It's the beginning of the end at this point. They either have to find a way out of this or they're going to completely collapse. And there's going to be God knows what happening in Russia once they collapse in this kind of a situation. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into some other major news really quickly in East Asia, as we have been able to hear of some fairly interesting nuclear developments that have actually been happening within this region. For one, starting off with an official announcement from the Republic of India today, the Republic of India has announced they have successfully tested the the Agni 5, a nuclear-capable intermediate-range ballistic missile. Technically, they say it's an intercontinental, but IRBMs have a maximum range of 5,500 kilometers, so technically this is more of an IRBM with a range of 5,000 kilometers, so it's an IRBM. The missile can reach speeds of up to Mach 24. Really quickly to clarify that, I know that a lot of people are obsessed with like hypersonics and all that. every single IRBM and every single ICBM gets up into multiple Machs in speed, up into the Mach 20s and 30s. So this is generally your normal type of an IRBM. I would generally call this thing the Crayola. It looks just like a Crayola crayon, at least in terms of its shape, and I have to feel that they got some inspiration from it. Also, man, they must have watched the movie Dictator, because they're like, the missile cannot be rounded, it has to be pointy, because it is very pointy. This is the most pointy looking nuclear missile I've ever seen.
Also, I like the little red tip like on the front of it right there, just to let you know that that's the point on it right there. Honestly, like I can't give them any points for the design of this thing. This thing looks, I'll be honest with you, from a PsyOps perspective, it doesn't look really intimidating. It looks kind of janky. Like it looks like it's wrapped in like black electrical tape, like on the at the cone of it and like around the midpoint of it. It doesn't even look like it's been painted. It's like they wrapped it in like Flex Seal or something. I would say when it comes to a design perspective, not that it really matters because nukes aren't like, you know, designed to be like Ferraris or something. But it would seem like the U.S. has them beat, I would say, quite a bit when it comes to that.
Like this Minuteman 3 looks more baller than this thing.
Oh, hell yeah, absolutely, man. It doesn't have any electrical tape anywhere on it.
Or, probably the most intimidating one to me, the Trident ICBM.
Yeah, I would say so, definitely.
Yeah, that thing is scary. But beyond that, they did test it. This picture, by the way, is like a little infographic thing that they made. This is not a real picture depicting the test, by the way. But still, it is interesting. Outside of that, China has now announced, as of today, that they are going to be unveiling a new drone. We were able to see it on social media. They are starting to leak pictures of it like they do with most craft. And apparently it has a 52-meter wingspan, meaning that this thing is about 150 feet in wingspan. So it's absolutely massive.
What do they call this one? The wing longer?
Man, they call this one the longer wing.
Man, they already have the wing long. They've already got the shorter wing version. Now this is the wing longer right here, or the wing long 2, one or the other. It's Temu. It's Temu round 2, basically.
Wait, no, I know what it is. It's wing too long. Like, that's what it is. It's the wing too long. So we're going to dub this one on the channel the wing too long. But it's 150 feet in wingspan. Things like a damn B-2 bomber in wingspan. It quite literally is. That's actually about the wingspan of a B-2. So very bizarre. Like, this thing is massive. I don't know what it does. Like it doesn't really look like it has a large bomb bay if it had one. It kind of looks like a giant recon drone, to be entirely honest with y'all. That's 52 meters in wingspan. What type of recon would this thing even do? Like, it's massive. Like, even if it is stealth, that thing is going to have a pretty decent looking radar cross section on modern radar. Like, it will, guaranteed. But beyond that, we also were able to hear, outside of that, that the Chinese now have surpassed 600 nuclear warheads inside of their arsenal. And according to what we've been able to hear, it does appear, like we were hearing yesterday with their announcement of a new ICBM, that they are rapidly expanding their nuclear arsenal. And considering that the Russian Federation is apparently supposed to be testing a nuclear reactor-powered cruise missile, India has now announced a brand new IRBM today. China announced a new ICBM yesterday. And it seems as though all of the countries that are technically in the Axis powers at this point are all developing new and more deadly nuclear weapons. It kind of begs the question, is the world entering a new nuclear arms race? And Maddie, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so it seems like people are very, very anxious to start testing weapons of mass destruction yet again, which is obviously not a good sign for world peace when people start doing that in mass numbers. And now India has jumped in the fray, which is obviously not good either, because obviously India has nukes now, apparently. So with so many nuclear tests around the world, are we entering a new nuclear arms race? It looks like 63% said yes, it is one, while 21% said no, it's just regular nuke testing, and 12% said I'm 50-50 on the question. And I would say it's pretty obvious. The world's in a very tumultuous point. We're going into uncharted waters, basically. I would say the tensions are as high as they could be before a world war breaks out. We're basically at that point right now, and we're hoping that we don't go over that precipice, because we're literally right there on the edge of the cliff, and we're about to slide right over it. And now everybody wants to start testing nukes just for the hell of it, and they obviously have a reason behind it, because they're worried that the world's about to go to war, and they want to make sure their arsenal works well, and they have the best high-tech weapons of mass destruction available. So it's a sign of the time. times, I would say. I'm with the 65%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be with the 65%. This is definitely a new nuclear arms race that we are entering. Considering the fact that we are seeing the Republic of India, China, and Russia, which are all members of the loosely affiliated BRICS alliance, all developing new and deadlier nuclear weapons, including the Agni 5, testing out a new MIRV system today. This is something that is showing us that the Axis powers are starting to develop and refine their nuclear arsenals to be able to try and stand off against the West as far as nuclear deterrent from a better footing. This means that we're naturally going to see a response, most likely from the United States, as the United States will most likely also start to develop its own deterrence in the form of more advanced, more capable intercontinental ballistic missiles, as well as tactical nuclear weapons to use on the battlefields of Europe or in East Asia if the situation was to ever call for it. But I would have to guarantee y'all, we are generally in a new nuclear arms race, which is a somewhat concerning thing, at least for global stability. We generally consider, on a historical level, nuclear arms races, or generally really any arms race, including naval arms races, which were the nuclear arms race of their time, to be somewhat destabilizing and dangerous for global stability. Hopefully we'll be able to see that some sort of equal footing can be reached in this particular scenario to see that this form of a new nuclear arms race starts to be limited or relegated in form, but this is starting to become a somewhat concerning development. Outside of that, we've also been able to hear of some very small updates from the Middle East. Just to bring y'all through them really quickly, we were able to hear there was a new fire in Iran near to the Tabriz airport, similar in style and fashion and location to the Tabriz airport as the Mashhad airport fire from yesterday, generally suggesting that these are being conducted by Mossad operatives. We also were finally able to get confirmation that there was a U.S. Special Forces raid that did occur last night. We reported on that preemptively, saying that it was a U.S. Special Forces raid. We didn't have complete confirmation yet. We do have complete confirmation now. It was a Special Forces raid that was killing a senior ISIS member who was supposed to become the next leader of ISIS, according to U.S. officials. He will no longer be the next leader of ISIS, and he'll be pushing up daisies. So it appears that he will not become the next leader of ISIS, and the Game of Thrones for all the little ISIS losers continue inside of Syria. We also were able to hear of an unidentified explosion around As-Sawaida. The reason why I say it's unidentified, we don't know who caused it. We don't know if the Syrian interim government conducting a genocide on the Druze. We don't know if it was Druze firing back at the Syrian interim government, and we do not know if it was the Israelis bombing the Syrian interim government. We have no clue what in the world was going on. Israeli aircraft were present around the area when the explosion occurred, which kind of leads credence to the idea it may have been an Israeli airstrike, but the Israelis never made an official comment on it, so we don't really know. So moving on out of that area, we also were able to hear that the Israelis are continuing their airstrikes inside of southern Lebanon against Hezbollah forces as well, as pictures started to emerge of Israeli airstrikes within the entire region of Lebanon. You can see some of the pictures there, and we also have an additional backup picture here as well. Take a look at these. That is one hell of an explosion.
What is that?
A 2,000-pound bomb, nonetheless.
Indeed.
Yes, indeed. But moving on from that and down into Israel, we also were able to hear that apparently Israel is considering opening up recruiting offices in the United States. If you didn't think the Marines were good enough for you, well, you can join the IDF, apparently. So that's something that they're considering, at least on Israeli Army radio. I don't really know if they're going to be following through with that one, though. I have a feeling that there's going to be some domestic policy concerns about Israel directly recruiting from the American population, because nobody's done that, like not even the Ukrainians. Like some people just like Ukraine and they go over and join the International Legion, but Ukraine's never really tried to just openly recruit Americans into the Ukrainian armed forces, so I don't know how that's going to go in America. Outside of that, we also were able to hear of heavy fire once again continuing within the North Gaza Strip, suggesting a possible Israeli offensive within the area, and we also got to see some pictures of the IDF on the Strip. I'm not going to lie, whoever their photographers are, the pics go hard.
Man, they got some really good photos right here. They're very, very picturesque right there. Look at that. Very picturesque.
Man, honestly, man, that picture could have some lo-fi beats put over that thing.
I would say.
You know, I gotta be honest with you. I like Burger King. Bro, that's like an outtake. But anyways.
Honestly, it's like there's some other stuff, but you know, it's okay though. It's okay.
Also, here's some more pictures.
Man, everybody likes to do that little nighttime photo with the nods on and stuff like that. Like, that's a classic military photo right there. Honestly, it goes hard every single time when every military replicates it.
Honestly, it does go hard. But honestly, this picture also went pretty hard as well. That was a pretty cool one.
That was cool right there. Also, well, you know what's not cool though is that tank literally aiming at their own guys. That's not cool. That's actually very horrifying.
Man, the tank loading up an HE shell to slam it right in the wall behind him. A shame. Really a shame. But anyways, moving on from that, it does appear that that's generally all of the news that we've been able to get out of the Middle East. And now, finally, folks, returning on back into the Ukraine war and also the diplomatic developments that have occurred between the possible Putin-Zelensky talk, which of course is in a disaster. Surprise, surprise. Before we get into all of that, I want to make sure that we address some questions from the chat. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chats of the night, we'll grab 3 and then jump right back into our news. Our first one goes to a channel legend. It is LC39A. He throws in a massive $136 donation, and thank you very much, LC39A, for really helping out the channel tremendously over the last 2 weeks especially, and we do appreciate that very, very much. He said, I think Poland is probably playing the victim.
Maybe. I do think for the massive support, maybe they are, but I generally would say that they're probably not, because generally no one, like the Romanians actually admit that they see the drones, it's just that they don't shoot them down because they don't know if it'll cause a greater issue with the Russians. The Latvians said they didn't see the drones. The Lithuanians said they saw the drones, they just didn't know what to do with them, so they just kind of like panicked and all hid. And the Polish said that they didn't see them. So generally, as far as it's gone from country to country, there's been a mixed answers or reactions to Russian drones. This is the only one that we've seen, though, that hit Poland that was loaded with explosives. But I generally have to say that, in my opinion, LC39, I don't think that they were playing the victim. I think it's legitimately the case. They just happen to not see it. It's entirely possible. For one, the drone was flying several hundred feet, well, most likely around 1,000 feet, possibly, but maybe as low as about 500. But it couldn't survive that sort of an altitude for long. It would start to have connection issues, most likely. But it was most likely 1,000 feet above the surface. It flew for about an hour inside of Poland. And we have seen that the Polish armed forces have had responses to drones that they have detected in the past or any kind of an air incursion. So it's a little bit weird that they wouldn't have a response this time, at least. Like, at least some sort of scrambling of jets. Even if the drone did hit the ground, it would have shown that they saw it. And the way that they responded, it generally appears that they just did not see it. Which seems a little bit odd because the Polish military is one of the strongest and most powerful ground armies in Europe. But it is entirely possible that this was a freak accident or an incident where the drone did make it through the detection layers and ended up blowing up that deep inside of Poland. It's possible, and I'm generally leaning towards the idea that it is possible because they could have shot it down. It would have made more sense for them to shoot it down, and then they didn't. And still, nonetheless, even with them possibly playing the victim, there isn't really a lot for them to get out of it, at least for now, because they're not dedicating themselves to putting peacekeeping troops in Ukraine post-war. And also, they're not making any significant responses to the Russians. All they said was it was a direct armed provocation, and they generally dropped it from there. So if it was an attempt to play victim, they're not really playing victim too well, and they're not really playing heavily into it, for that matter. So I would have to say there is a chance that they may be playing victim. But in my personal opinion, I actually think that they might not be. And I think that that may have legitimately just made it through the airspace, which is really bizarre. But a huge thanks to you, a massive thanks to you so much once again, LC39A, for that unbelievable, incredible support. Because it is folks like you who helped this channel to keep on running and help us to make this channel possible day in and day out. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to Annoyed AF, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, as well for that support. And I guess you could say that you have a lot in common with Zelensky, but he's also annoyed AF with the Russians. But they said thank you, and LSA.
Hey, and thank you for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. It is folks like you who have helped to make this channel possible and make this thing a reality each and every single day. I got to thank you massively so much once again for enjoying this channel and supporting it, because if it was not for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't have been able to keep it running well on into the present day. So a massive thanks to you once again, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the remainder of the news.
All right, so this one goes to Old Warrior, another channel legend, by the way, and he throws in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that support once again. He said, coffee is going up, and I bought my own roaster for like $90 and buy Dalat Arabica for $10 for 3 pounds of unroasted. And you might look into that and take one from the chat.
That is an interesting idea, old warrior. I've never thought of that. And coffee is going up. Everything's going up, actually. We were talking about some stuff behind the scenes today, and it just looks like the prices are increasing on everything, little by little. And it's just eating into the savings more and more, and it's really annoying with that. But beyond that, I do have to say, thank you so much for the support. And also, Dalit Arabica for $10 for 3 pounds of unroasted. That's an interesting idea. Maybe we'll get some of that at some point, possibly. Maybe we'll enjoy a little sip of it. Generally, I love my cold brew, and my cold brew keeps me up at these late times of the night to be able to keep these shows running. But I do thank you massively for support and the recommendation for a new type of fuel to keep the Enforcer channel rolling day in and day out. And a massive thanks to you once again, Old Warrior, for being an old guard and a channel legend, a lot like your name suggests, and helping this channel to keep on rolling 1,274 days after it started its pretty much continuous news coverage. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're going to be moving out of this question segment and on into the war in Ukraine. Or more so, the end of the war? I'm just kidding. There's going to be no end in sight. But beyond that, we were able to hear that the United States of America has been taking some interesting action. Well, actually, I'm sorry, that's actually periphery news right there. All of the main news actually happened in the Russian Federation today. Totally forgot to bring that up. So let's get into the Russian Federation and start breaking it down before I move into the American periphery news, which is kind of an extent of this whole thing. But nevertheless, we were able to hear that Sergei Lavrov today, he said that Russia has proposed raising the level of delegation heads at the negotiations with Ukraine. But Putin is not coming. He's not going to be showing up. So basically what this means, to explain the last time that Zelensky tried to meet Putin, Putin sent the water boy. Actually, he was the helper of the water boy as the head of the delegation. He was the deputy aide to the president of the Russian Federation, meaning that he kind of like helps him out with like moving some papers around and getting him a water. So this time, Lavrov saying they will raise the level of the delegation heads, meaning that we're not going to be seeing the deputy water boy. We're going to see the water boy leading the delegation this next time. Who could refuse?
Oh, man, they're going to upgrade him to Gatorade Boy next. That's what he means by he's going to raise the level of delegation. He went from Water Boy to Gatorade Boy. Then he'll go to, let's see here, Vodka Boy. That's the top level right there. Once you reach Vodka Boy, you don't go any higher than that with talks. So that's the highest level.
I got to tell you, man, there's a one level, though, that's higher. One level that's slightly higher than the one you suggested, Matthew. You know what it is?
Jack Daniel level?
Horseface water boy.
Horseface. I don't know if I'd want that. I'll be honest. I think I'll pass on that.
Man, you know, if you ever hear it from Horseface, you know it's something that you can take to the banking, cash it in. That's a face that not even a mother can love right there. That is rough. But outside of that,
he's got that equestrian look going on. he's got that horse stable look going on, like a little rig.
Man, he is so high class. He doesn't ride horses. He became the horse. He's that high class.
Man, he embodies the horse. He is the lone rider. No. He's not the lone rider. He's the horse, though. I don't know what the right term for that is, but he's the horse that's being lone ridden, I guess you could say. Putin happens to be right. Well, I don't want to word it like that, but Putin happens to be riding this horse, actually.
Yeah, look,
that came out so bad. That came out so bad.
This is actually Putin and Lavrov about 10 years ago or so. Look at how far Lavrov has evolved. He went from being a literal horse to just a guy who has a face of a horse. I mean, that's a huge improvement.
That's what happens. That's what happens when Putin molds somebody like that. He molded him right into a diplomat of all things. It wasn't meant to be, but he's here today.
You know, also, man, what's even crazier is that Peskov is the two-faced rat from the Nutcracker play, and he just evolved into the spokesperson for the Kremlin. But outside of that, we know that Horseface said this today. It was a direct quote from him. So it appears that the Russians are completely abandoning the idea of a direct Zelensky-Putin meeting. So we also were able to hear as an extension of that Dugan is I can't even hold my disdain for Dugan. Dugan is spewing his shit again. So let's just read it and let's see what he says. I'm just going to read it completely unfiltered, by the way. There's going to be no filter on what Dugan's saying. That doesn't mean that we agree with it. We're just reading it in the context of what he said. So here's what Dugan said today. This is one of Putin's top advisors, by the way. Trump wants to stop the war, but even the most benevolent, subjectively conditions from his side are absolutely unacceptable for us. As for Zelensky and the European Union, they want everything to be changed significantly against us and for their own benefit. Objectively, I see no basis for negotiations with Zelensky. Nothing can be resolved there, and for Trump, the price of showing our goodwill and ultimately achieving nothing is too high. All the more so since Trump can at any moment go crazy and reconsider all agreements. I absolutely do not see how Trump controls the European Union and Zelensky. Even MAGA supporters, I'm not saying that in a political way, we're just reading Dugan's statements, who highly value Trump's sovereignty, cannot see it this time either. On the contrary, Trump is very dependent on the neoconservatives and the deep state, and they're leading him towards a deal with Russia that could prove fatal for us. We have the ability to resist direct military confrontation, but we are weak in the face of the benevolent signals coming from the West. It resembles deceiving a drug addict with a dose while he's struggling with his addiction. Dependence on the West. Most likely, the deep state intends to play exactly on this. This guy is just like the craziest guy. Look at him. I mean, he's literally like the modern Rasputin, but this guy talks absolute. Man, I wish I could find that meme of like shit spewing out of an airpod, and this guy's like looking at it with disgust. Like that's this guy. Like whenever he says anything. But beyond that,
honestly, on his comments right there, if those comments are indeed the case, because I didn't really see a source for these comments earlier, but it sounds like something that Dugan would say. So I would tend to believe it, but the words that he's saying here, or at least allegedly saying, it sounds to me like he's advising Putin to totally abandon peace talks all the way together. He definitely doesn't want Zelensky to meet Putin in real life. That he does not want that to happen. And this guy right here has Putin's ear. This guy is very close to Putin's inner circle. So it's not like he's some fringe lunatic that happens to roam the streets. This guy holds some power in Russia, and he's also saying things that seems to indicate that Russia wants to stay completely separate from any real peace talks. If they're talking whatsoever, it's just simply to fool the West, and that would seem to line up with what we've said the whole time.
Yeah, also, I see some people saying that's word salad. That didn't even make sense. So to cut it down, basically what he's saying is that any attempted negotiations of peace by the Russians puts them in a position of weakness. They maintain a position of strength to their benefit by not continuing peace talks. That's basically the shortened version of what he's saying. He also happened to reference that the Russians were drug addicts in his second statement, which I kind of found funny. It resembles deceiving a drug addict with a dose while he's struggling with his addiction. That's how he described the Russians. And it's like, bruh, like, this, I'm not even kidding, folks. This guy looks like a drug addict. Look at him. Like, that's a guy that you would see, like, out there, you know, like, trying to get his next dose of, you know, ketamine or something. Like, he looks like, honestly, he might actually be getting the ketamine from Lavrov, because I actually heard they prescribed that to him last week. But, this guy is absolutely crazy. But nevertheless, we do have to make it quite clear. This guy is incredibly important in Russia. He is one of the key advisors to Putin officially. This guy, it's saying this stuff. He's one of the key advisors. So with that in mind, the fact that this lunatic is advising Putin and saying this kind of stupid stuff, and it makes absolutely no sense. It's not grounded in reality. And also, by the way, the guy's an absolute nut. Like, he talks about esoteric stuff, like, you know, like the deep state, the lizard people, all that sort of thing. He's heavy into it. That's sort of like nutty territory right there. But beyond that, a lot of people are talking at this moment about the Russians raising the level of the delegation for the peace talks, and whether Putin's going to show up or not, or whether the meeting is just completely off. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
And so far, Putin is totally silent. The Russian officials are saying they're going to raise the level of delegation, whatever that means. It could be, like we said, raising it up to vodka boy. We're not really sure. But one thing is certain, Putin is not saying that he's dedicated to actually showing up and meeting Zelensky in real life. And the initial response by Putin was he told Zelensky to come alone by himself to Moscow to have talks if he wants to have them. So clearly, Putin's not serious. And now he's been gone totally silent about the entire thing. And he has Lavrov, the horse, out there talking on his behalf. So what are your thoughts? 50% said the Zelensky-Putin meeting is off, while 39% said it was never going to happen in the first place, and 7% said the Putin meeting will still happen. So only about 7% of the people believe this is actually still a realistic possibility. I would tend to agree with them 100%. This was never going to happen. Let's be honest here. We knew that was not going to be the case going into these talks that they just had between Putin and the United States president. We knew it wasn't going to happen, and Putin is making it clear he doesn't want to talk to Zelensky because he really can't. He can't be seen with the enemy, which is Zelensky, who he's tried to assassinate in the past. He's not going to be seen with him. He's not going to have that on camera. So I would say it never really was going to happen. I'm with the 38%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be with 38%. This was never going to happen. I mean, they said that they were going to meet with Zelensky in bad faith. They never had an intention of ever doing that, and they never will, because that would legitimize the Ukrainian government, because they would recognize Zelensky as the president. And that's a huge thing in Russian propaganda. They cannot recognize him as the legitimate leader of the state of Ukraine. That's completely off of the books, off the record. They cannot do that, so they will never meet with him. Period, under any circumstances. So it was off the books before it even began. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know. And also, by the way, just to add icing onto the cake in case you weren't already sold, Medvedev is back to his state-approved rants. Here is one of them. The brainless Gallic rooster can't let go of the idea of sending troops to Ukraine. It's been explicitly stated, no NATO troops as peacekeepers. Russia won't accept such a security guarantee. But the hoarse, pathetic bird continues to crow to prove it's king of the coop.
No, he's not the horse. That's Lavrov. He's getting confused here. He's seeing Lavrov and Zelensky, and he thinks that Zelensky's the horse. No, buddy. It's Lavrov. Y'all have the horse on y'all's side. That's not on our side for sure. And also, what the hell? Like, these insults that come out of Medvedev's mouth, I'm not even really sure where he's even coming up with these insults. I've never heard anybody talk like this. Like, I've never heard these insults in my life anywhere.
Bro, he thinks he thinks he's the philosopher king. Him and that fella down in El Salvador are about to get into a beating contest, like to see who's the philosopher king. This guy thinks to sound smart. Honestly, you know what this comes off as? Let me go get that dog with the mask meme.
I was trying to pull up as well what the hell a Gallic rooster is. What the hell is that? Apparently, in French, it's a national emblem of France. It symbolizes France, particularly in context of patriotism. So I guess he's referring to Macron. I guess I think that's who he's referring to there with that statement. I would only assume. So he's insulting everybody again. He's insulting Macron. He's attacking literally everybody.
That's actually the case, because the rooster is actually a symbol of France. So yeah, he is talking about Macron and saying the Gallic rooster. But that's how he comes off saying the stupid stuff, like this meme. That's how he comes. Let me get the full meme. There we go, where they circle the dog and the dog's wearing the mask. That's what he thinks he is, like, or something like that.
I'll tell you what. Dogs look like Megamind out here.
Bruh, that dog's got the plan. Also, by the way, drones were entering the Moscow air defense perimeter earlier in the day when he was making those statements, so he can cry a little more. Outside of that, I also have to get y'all into some periphery American news before I get y'all straight into the Ukraine war, because there were some interesting developments that happened in America today. One, we were able to hear that we're now putting sanctions against officials from Canada, France, Fiji, and Senegal that are a part of the ICC over their supposed threat to national security. Generally, the American position is that there can be no court superior to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the existence of an international criminal court is usurping the authority of the U.S. court system, which is supposed to be, at the absolute head, the U.S. Supreme Court. The ICC, technically, as it exists, kind of overrides the Supreme Court's decision-making power for the larger part, because it's not subjected to the authority of the Supreme Court. So we do not recognize its authority here in America, and they've also started to put some American officials out there with arrest warrants in the ICC, so we're starting to have a greater issue with that at the moment. So we actually did sanction some of those officials today. In the meantime, we've also been able to hear that the Navy is undergoing some growing pains, at least as far as drone warfare, from what we've been able to hear. According to some officials that spoke to Reuters today, the U.S. Navy's big plan for drone fleets to counter China is stumbling fairly hard. Test boats are crashing due to software bugs. A key autonomy contract with L3 Harris got paused, and the Navy even fired or generally removed from his post an admiral that was running the program. Billions are being poured in, but the drones are not ready. So it appears that right now, the Navy and the Army are having some problems with drone development. I've got to be honest with y'all, I think the only way to fix that is to pretty much just inundate civilians from the civilian sector that are working with drones into the armed forces. Like, just skip them past basic and everything, be like, congrats, you're now a major, go at it. You know, here's a whole group of guys, go at it and figure it out. Because that's what they did in Ukraine with Magyar and Magyar's Birds, which were the general developers of all drone doctrine in Ukraine currently. He was just a civilian who they immediately threw into an officership and told him, here you go, here's a whole bunch of guys, figure out the drone thing and make it work. And he made it work pretty quickly within about less than a year. So I think if we do that here in the United States, I think that's going to work. Like, I think that actually would work incredibly well.
that they're going to try to do that, but they're not going to use the U.S. people to do it. They're going to try to use the Ukrainians who are already well versed in it in a wartime setting. Because I heard that the U.S. president was discussing with Zelensky in private, at least according to our sources, that he was discussing with Zelensky reaching some sort of deal where Ukraine would open up their domestic drone production to provide those to the United States and also provide training as well to U.S. soldiers on how to actually weaponize and use the FPVs in a wartime setting. So that would seem to be probably the most logical answer to that. Now, we're going to have to involve the U.S. Manufacturing base in that, because obviously we can't rely on a foreign country for drone defense. Like, it's good to get started doing that, but we need to domestically bring that here to the United States. So I think Ukraine will be basically the jumping board for it. They'll show us how to get started, and then we got to run with it from there.
Yeah, I would say that that's definitely going to be the case. But at the same time, we also need to have Americans involved in this and say, hey, you're like our forerunning drone guy here in America. You want an officership? Like, skip basic, everything. You pretty much go in straight as a major. We'll give you like some minimal officer training school, vocational skills on how to generally lead a unit. None of the other basic involved. You're just going to be working on this and get them involved and then have them work with the Ukrainians. So that way they at least have some prerequisite knowledge. They're not working from the ground up. The Ukrainians help them out with what they know. And generally we get the meeting of the minds in the best sense. And hopefully they'll come up with something beneficial for the Navy and the Army, because it sounds like, at least on our own efforts right now, our military industries or war industries really aren't designed or suited to work on the sort of rapid drone development sort of environment that we're existing now, like we saw in Ukraine. And also, by the way,
we've been saying that for a while too. We've been saying that for a long time. We've been saying how the legacy defense contractors, and also no offense, by the way, it's just the way the United States has always done it. It's always been about making these very complex, expensive systems, jacking up the price a bit, and then selling them to the United States government, which that doesn't really work in the modern day war environment. It was great in the past, and generally it's worked for all the wars we've gotten into in the Middle East and elsewhere, but it's not going to work for the next war, at least in my opinion. They got to start, promoting companies like Anduril, companies that are a lot more flexible, and they're able to create smaller, more disposable systems, because that's the way war is going to be fought. It's really not a choice. We're kind of forced into it.
But what we really need, because this is what they've done in Ukraine, is mass-produced, incredibly cheap drones. Like, that's the problem that they're not getting to the crux of in America. Like, everything, like, even with the 2nd Cav Regiment's drone detachment, they're going, let's 3D print the drones. That's almost an artisan-type process to 3D print each and every single drone. They're having to 3D print the frames, the boards. The Ukrainians used to do that, and they found out that they could just not produce the number needed at the cheap enough cost at an economy of scale at that kind of production cycle. They had to be able to injection mold all of them, press them out in the hundreds, the frames alone, and then have a whole bunch of people pretty much on an assembly line produce thousands of these drones per factory per day. That's the only way to do it. If you can't do it that way, drone warfare is not going to be effective in the way it works in Ukraine, which is the most effective way we've seen it turn out so far in the world. So that's what we really need to do. Like, that's easier said than done. That would take a lot of development work and training and an endless amount of that in the United States. But that's what we need to start working towards as a theoretical concept. It's the same kind of concept the Ukrainians have. Cheap, mass-produced drones. They don't have to be high quality. They don't have to have a million fail-safes. They just have to be able to be operated by a drone pilot, and they have to be able to take off, fly several miles, and then fly right into something and explode. That's how they always work. That's how they're proven to work. And they're cheap. They're less than $100 each most of the time now in Ukraine. But moving on from that, we also were able to hear that while the Russians are wanting peace, the FBI has put out the following announcement. This is from today. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is warning the public, private sector, and international community of the threat posed to computer networks and critical infrastructure by cyber actors attributed to the Russian Federal Security Service, the FSB. Center 16. The FBI detected Russian FSB cyber actors exploiting Simple Network Management Protocol, SNMP, and end-of-life networking devices running an unpatched vulnerability, CVE 2018-0171, in Cisco Smart Install, SMI, to broadly target entities in the United States and globally. Over the past year, the FBI detected the actors collecting configuration files for thousands of networking devices associated with U.S. entities across critical infrastructure sectors. On some vulnerable devices, the actors modified configuration files to enable unauthorized access to those devices. The actors used the unauthorized access to conduct reconnaissance in the victim networks, which revealed their interest in protocols and applications commonly associated with industrial control systems. The FSB Center 16 unit conducting the this activity is known to cybersecurity professionals by several names, including Berserk Bear and Dragonfly, which referred to separate but related cyber activity clusters. For over a decade, this unit has compromised networking devices globally, particularly devices accepting legacy encrypted protocols like SMI and SNMP versions 1 and 2. This unit has also deployed custom tools to certain Cisco devices, such as the malware publicly identified as Sinful Knock in 2015. So the FSB is out doing espionage routines and strategies against the West and their computer systems, while they're supposedly saying that they're all for peace. What a wonderful thing. But it's good to know that the FBI is generally on top of it and putting out a public notice, at least for now. Moving on from that, and finally on into the war in Ukraine itself, we have been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces were, of course, being engaged by drone forces overnight, and we were able to see heavy air defense fire over the city of Kyiv. Here's the clip. I do not know what that was.
Ominous sound, I would say. I'm not sure what that is either. Sounds like laser. Do you hear that sound? It sounds like laser beams.
Honestly, it sounds like Star Wars, like laser guns, you know? That's crazy.
Go back for a second. That was an odd sound. Never heard that anywhere on the battlefield.
I think I went a little bit. Here we go.
That was weird. That was weird. Now, they're not, are they using the new laser system that they were testing in Ukraine, or is that something that they're fielding on a different type of system?
We haven't really heard of them using the laser system. I think this might be the Skynex Ranger, like Orlikon gun system, and it's just sounding weird because it's being heard from a distance, but that is absolutely sick sounding, whatever that is. That actually sounds very futuristic, whatever air defense they have in Kyiv right now. I wish we knew what it was. It's gun-based, though, and so I'm guessing it's the Skynex Ranger, because that is around Kyiv right now.
Seems like the air defense is working pretty damn good.
I would say so. Pretty impressive stuff, honestly. But outside of that, we also were able to hear in our location unknowns today that the Ukrainians have developed something that can only be described as the greatest. It's a drone-guided 155mm explosive ordnance.
Oh, wow. Look at that. That's a doozy. That's like bigger than Baba Yaga.
This thing is as big as Baba Yaga, and it's carrying a 155mm M798 HE shell. This is pretty interesting because the other variant, well, not really a variant, but the other sort of a system of this is the M982 Excalibur, which is a laser-guided artillery round fired from 155mm artillery pieces like the M777 or the M109 Paladin. This is a laser-guided system, meaning that someone, a actual recon sniper, someone along those lines, has to point a laser at the target, and that artillery shell has a advanced computer system inside of it that will pick up the detection or the more so impact of the laser on the ground, and it will aim directly for that laser as it's coming in, and it will hit dead on to where that laser is pointing. There is generally no margin of error. It's about, like, I think 2 or 3 feet margin of error, but it hits dead on target. This thing does that as well, but it does not cost $100,000 because one of these shells costs 100 grand. One high explosive shell of the M798 variety costs about $5,000 or $4,000, depending on what batch they were produced in. So this is about $4,000, and the additional drone attachment is probably maybe about another couple of $1,000s. So this thing is less than $10,000, a tenth of the cost of the Excalibur, and it can do the same thing, and it also does not need laser guidance to be able to hit the target. So in general, this thing is actually wildly cost-effective and does the exact same thing.
Yeah, that is pretty good right there. Honestly, I think when it comes to like a military like innovation standpoint, it might be better to have to be scrappy with your stuff instead of just having a wide open field of like parts, endless budgets, and things like that. It might be better to have a scrappy approach to it because it seems like Ukraine's doing honestly, not to just like glaze the Ukrainian military, but they are doing a fantastic job at innovating with the stuff like this and coming up with the exact same solutions we have in the West, but for like you said, like a fraction of the cost.
Also, by the way, I do have to clarify, it is not laser-guided correction, folks. It's actually GPS-guided. So you actually put in the GPS coordinates, I believe, into the shell before it's fired, which is a fairly fast process to a sense. But still, This shell is quite expensive because according to the 2021 figures from the president's budget request, one shell cost $112,800. So these things are not exactly cheap. That's actually quite expensive. To put this out there for y'all, that is about the cost of a Mercedes S550 being shot at someone per shell. So that's a very expensive.
It wouldn't be American if it was cheap, man. It would if it was cheap, that would definitely not be American. And like a hallmark of our stuff is the stuff is crazy expensive.
Man, everyone's like, so will we hit him? We're like, yeah, it'll just cost about the price of a luxury car, but we'll hit him all right. Like, it's like, man, I'm not gonna lie.
Could you imagine if they price this stuff at like reasonable rates where they didn't jack it up because they know the U.S. government's going to pay the rate? That we would have like some crazy stockpiles. Like if we bought the stuff like at a more reasonable value that was probably should be priced at, we would be just like hoarding this stuff.
Yeah, I would have to say we probably would be. But that cost for a single shell, like when you really think about it for what the Ukrainians are doing with like their jackleg, like redneck style production, which is actually producing like a comparable system at the 10th of the cost, it really makes you cry a little bit with how much American weapons cost. Like this thing that's $113,000 when the Ukrainians could do the same thing, only slightly worse on like a qualitative level for a 10th of the cost. It's honestly kind of sad. But
and the bad part is we're buying it with a credit card. Basically, the U.S. is buying it on credit, so we're not really paying for it. We're just getting more debt and having to buy it.
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of a sad thing. But beyond that, we also did get to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and it was spicy. Miss DC keeper the record stated the troop losses are below average, artillery and vehicles are above average, and 260 drones lost is the 8th highest daily loss of the war. Getting into the actual numbers themselves, 920 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 4 APCs, 142 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 50 artillery pieces, 260 drones, and 7 cruise missiles. In general, not a bad day for the armed forces of Ukraine. Moving on from that and into the front lines, we also were able to hear, getting on into some bigger news, the flamingo might have been used today. I hate to tell you all this, the flamingo ain't pink. I went and looked. This flamingo apparently was photoshopped to some extent. They are all gray or black in paint scheme, but I do like the idea that they made the flamingo pink just to make it pink because it's called a flamingo. But technically, we believe that this may have been used for the first time today against the Novoshitinsk oil refinery, which is near to the town of Novoshitinsk. We actually have some clips here to show y'all, and let's look at them. First off, here's some of the impact pictures that we have. Now let's get to the video. Does it look like this may have been hit by a flamingo or not? That's what we were wanting to generally find out. So let's watch the clip. You see some pretty significant fires.
Flamingo or nah? I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell from this distance. The Russians though seem to be convinced it was a flamingo. They were panicking very badly on Telegram. Like they were going off talking about this being a pelican or what do they call this damn thing? A flamingo?
Yeah.
A flamingo. Yeah, a flamingo, not a pelican. What the hell am I talking about?
I'm not gonna lie. I think it wasn't a flamingo because the thing has a 3,000 kilometer range with a 1,000 kilogram warhead. This thing is certainly not cheap for the Ukrainians to make, even at the cheap costs they produce their weapons relative to how much money they have to spend. It's not cheap. So why in the world would they use this on a target that is literally right across the Russian border from occupied Ukraine? That wouldn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think this was attacked with more conventional munitions than a flamingo.
Yeah, it would seem to be. It would seem like if they wanted to really like show it off, they would probably choose a much farther away target, but they didn't. So I don't know. Like the Russians, well, at least the Russians are paranoid. Like they're very scared at this point about the whole thing. So it's achieving its psychological effect, I would say. But I don't think this is the real use of it. Right now it's just speculation. The Russians are claiming it was a flamingo or pelican, whatever you want to call it. But we don't really know for a fact right now. We're waiting for confirmation.
Honestly, man, what the Russians are getting scared of is getting more and more comical through the war. At first it was Baba Yaga Bliet, now it's a flamingo. Now they're gonna be freaking out about a flamingo. But anyways,
you know the one thing that's remained constant throughout the whole war they're scared of is their own commanders when they like try to run away. That's the main thing they're scared of. They're not really scared so much of the Ukrainian stuff except for their own commander snagging them on the way out.
Man, honestly, the commanders are the scariest. The blocking brigades, the blocking units are even scarier. But beyond that, Russian officials did reject Ukrainian security guarantees today. And what are people thinking about that, Matthew? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so the Russians did officially reject today the Ukrainian security guarantees and also stated today that the Russian government wants to have the veto power over security guarantees, which basically makes them moot, so they rejected them. And also, they've also expressed a new desire to control all of Ukraine politically, which seems to go contrary to their peace talks they were having. So are the talks over? And it looks like 54% said yes, they are over, while 32% said the talks were never real in the first place, and 8% said it's too early to conclude it. And I'm with the 32%. The talks were never real in the first place, or real, if you want to call it that. The talks were a complete sham. It was a way for Putin to buy more time, and we may be seeing something. The Russians might throw another bone, maybe in the next couple of weeks to at least keep it rolling a little bit. But I think in the end, though, it's probably going to be nothing coming out of it when it comes to ending the war. It's just going to be more stalling. It'll be more strategy and also stalling tactics by Putin. That's what we're going to see in the future. So if you see something else that you would tend to believe, like, oh, look, the enforcers were wrong, wait and see how it turns out, though, because I think Putin's fooling everybody. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I think Putin's pulling a little sneaky, and I think that the talks are largely going to be over at this point. There's going to be a lot more stalling conducted. This is a wine and dine. This isn't going to be anything done quick. After this, the president will be going, well, it looks like the talks are over, and then Putin will go, wait, I've had a change of heart. I want to talk to him, and then we'll go through the whole thing possibly again. But still, the long run scenario is that the talks are probably not going to happen ever. That's my opinion on it. Maybe they'll happen once the Russian economy collapses because they don't have fuel, but that's still at least months down the road from now. So I would say generally these talks are not going to happen, at least within our time right now. So with that, I hope that does address it the best we can, and it's time for us to now move on to the Ukrainian front lines. Covering the Konstantinivka front for a short moment, we were able to see the Russians getting slammed in Soledar by GBU-62s. The Ukrainians absolutely love the GBU-62 and the AASM-250 hammers. These are their primary use air-to-ground munitions, which it's interesting. They prefer these the most. But that facility was completely destroyed. Moving on from that and into our next clip near to Kucheriv Yar, we also got to see the Russians getting obliterated by the 36 Marines, which actually have Magyar's birds as a part of their command. We can see them hitting a Buhanka, and then we can also see them about to hit a basement. Any second. Oh, the video is buffering, so we'll move on from there. We can also see these drones continuing to hit their targets. This is the calm before the storm, folks. I'm about to drop an absolute bombshell on y'all in a second, literally just a couple of miles away. But we've got to build up to that moment. And we can see them slamming the Russian forces. Just endlessly. Look at them. Holy moly. And another
slamming them so hard right there. They're like building like snake holes out here or something, like the way these things are built to the ground. They're not even really like foxholes anymore.
Man, honestly, they aren't. And that's the end of the clip, but it's nice to see the 36 doing that. So, it's now time for us to get on into the real news. The Lost Battalion has been completely destroyed, almost. Down here near the area of Zolotokola Diaz, the 93rd Brigade pushed the Russians so hard yesterday. Once again, just want to put this out there, the 93rd was just charged yesterday with the responsibility by the Ukrainian 1st National Guard Corps of clearing out the Russian Lost Battalion from Kucheriv Yar. In the course of 24 hours, not only have they liberated Kucheriv Yar, we understand they have most likely taken out another company or two from the battalion. So now the battalion is down to about 3 companies worth of manpower, and they're not even in Kucheriv Yar. We were able to confirm today, just to show this really quickly, the Ukrainians have retaken Kucheriv Yar. We have been able to also get a confirmation that the Russians are apparently stuck out in the valley, just to the east of Kucheriv Yar, and the Ukrainians are also continuing to take prisoners. This video was actually filmed by the 93rd, most likely near to the valley area, just east of Kucheriv Yar, and we can see several Russians that already were taken prisoner from the Lost Battalion here.
Somebody's yucking it up back there in the corner.
Honestly. Now, here's something.
Look, they call them the Lost Battalion for a reason. They got lost this time. They got lost in the weeds.
Okay, so the Lost Battalion is about to take a whole other meaning, okay? So, you know, the Russian lines were south, right? You know, like south of Kucheriv Yar down here where they could break out and get really... So, The 93rd pushed them in the offensive, and where did they go? They went a mile up and to the north towards Rushke, in this little valley right about here. So, where do you think that they ended up later today, Matthew? Where do you think that they ended up after that?
They ended up handcuffed on the ground with zip ties.
Further north at Vesely, they are going away from the Russian lines. They're getting pushed further in behind the Ukrainian lines because we were able to hear later today that another Ukrainian unit, the 93rd, once again, was then pushing the lost battalion out of Vesely. So just to explain what's happened in 2 days to the remnants of the lost battalion, first they lost their holdings at Zaloti Kolodias, and the remnants then fell back to Kucheriv Yar to the rest of the battalion to organize their defense there. The 93rd in a single day engaged the Russian forces there and pushed them northeast into the valley just south of Hrushke. Then it appears that the lost battalion was running away from the 93rd north, away from the Russian lines, which are south, into Vesely and Hrushke. So then the 93rd cleared them out of Vesely. So we do not know where they are at the moment. They're currently traveling or trending northwards, away from the Russian lines, but they are at this point about 4 miles away from the Russian front lines from what we understand, and they're continuously getting pushed deeper into the Ukrainian rear lines and disintegrating at this point. So here's the clip from the 93rd showing them liberating Vesely hours after we were able to hear that they cleared out Kucheriv Yar. So here's the clip. I'm going to have to mute that, of course, there's copyrighted audio. But we can see them here showing the footage of the 93rd moving in through the town of Vesely and clearing out the lost battalion even from here. Well, it's not even shocking that they're clearing them out from there. At this point, there's only about 3 companies left at best from what we're hearing, which is about 250 men. So there's not a lot of them left. The battalion started off several days ago with most likely, if it was at full strength, around 800 and 900 men. They're down to about 300 to 250 now, which means that they've lost about 2/3 of their fighting strength.
Also, by the way, I'm not sure if you saw that, but do you see that little drone the Ukrainians have running around? Like, it has a gun on it.
Yeah, man, like the 93rd is strapped. Like they are the ones who actually operate the gun drones.
Yeah, that's crazy. Just rolling up and down the street, just tearing everything up. That's honestly wild. I hadn't really seen that on the footage yet.
Yeah, I mean, dude, the Fighting 93rd is one of the most impressive brigades in Ukrainian service. They're the ones who use the automated gun drones on the ground, and they also were the ones, I believe, that experimented with the flying gun-based drones as well, that had the AK strapped underneath them. I think they were also the brigade that tested that out for a little while.
Interesting. They are lighting this place up, though. They brought in the tanks and everything. They're letting them have it.
Yeah,
Honestly, those Russians are probably regretting pushing this far up into this territory at this point, because they are getting absolutely hammered, potentially encircled. This turned it up backfiring big time.
They are hammered, encircled, and they're being pushed even farther away from the Russian lines where they could have tried to attempt a breakout and return back to their front lines. These guys are screwed. We're expecting that the remainder of the lost battalion will be destroyed within the next 48 hours, possibly. It'll probably happen within the next 36, but we're giving 48 to give a more comfortable time window. And we can see the gun drones once again rolling around and lighting up the place.
Honestly, this is tough right here, and all because Putin wanted to try to go into those talks in Alaska with a little bit of land that he grabbed, so that way he could try to say he was winning the war somehow. All this over that one stupid maneuver. Honestly, Putin is not the grand strategist he was talking about. These are some pretty stupid moves.
Yeah, these were absolutely stupid, ridiculous. We also were able to hear that the Russians, apparently as a reprisal, hit and destroyed a generally a frontline hospital for wounded soldiers. Generally, these are supposed to be out of bounds, and technically it's a war crime to hit these because these are clearly denoted usually as a medical facility. But the Russians actually ended up conducting an airstrike on one of these today and claimed that 15 Ukrainian service members inside of the hospital were killed as a result. Technically a war crime. I believe that this is not even technically a war crime. This is just a flat-out war crime. But moving on from that and out of that little bit of news, we also were able to hear near to the area of the city of Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians in the 155th Mechanized Brigade also took out a sitting Russian drone. Russian drones nowadays, actually all drones these days, conduct a tactic called sitting, which is where they fly to a location and they sit on the ground on the road to conserve battery power. Once a vehicle drives by, they fly right off the road and slam directly into the vehicle. So it's kind of like the modern day equivalent of a bouncing Betty landmine, the ones that you would walk over or drive over, and then they would pop up into the air and explode right beside you and, blow your face off. That's pretty much the equivalent of what this thing does. So the Ukrainians shot it up before it could do that. He's missing by a hair. Literally just... Oh, there we go. He got it.
Oh. Damn, son. The real-life version of Tannerite.
Man, honestly. We also were able to see the Petardier crews at work in the 25th Brigade in the south of the city of Pokrovsk as they were throwing in TM-62 satchel charges into Russian positions near to the southern end of the city, which we can see right here in this clip. We can see him running up. He's about to throw the charge in here in a second. And any second now, he'll light the charge, throw it. Oh, actually, they already threw. Wait a minute, hold up. What the hell? Oh, wait, sorry, I think I got the whole sequence confused. So, where did they throw in the charge? Like, I don't see the hole that they threw it in. Apparently, they threw it in there at the beginning of the clip. They both went to hide. There's apparently some Russians holed up in that bunker instead of the one that this guy just entered. And then it exploded. And there we are. Those satchel charges have got a kick.
I wouldn't want to be carrying that in a satchel. That seems like a crazy risk.
Yeah, that is a dangerous risk. Imagine if it got shot. Like, that would be disastrous.
That could be life-changing.
I think that's life-ending, technically. Like, I think
but it's still a change. It's just a very negative change.
Man, it changes you from solid matter to a gaseous matter.
Gaseous or chunky.
Well, it depends on your preference.
Yeah, it could be that soup or it could be that salad, either one.
I guess you could say that the Ukrainians are giving out unlimited soup and salad then.
I guess you could say that. Look at that.
But moving on from the 25th, and also moving around the cross front a little bit more, we also got to see the Russians getting hit by the 68th Jaeger Brigade.
Oh, look. I could make a joke, but I can't do it, so I'm going to offend somebody with it, so I'm not going to do it, but I had a good one.
Oh, I bet you did. But we can't say it. We can't say it, sadly. I have a general idea, though, what it was, but we can't say it. Because I was probably thinking the same thing, honestly, because once you said I can't say it, I was like, damn, I was actually thinking that about my joke. I was like, I think that might be the case. But we could see...
you know the people that ride bicycles? Y'all know the people that ride the bicycles? They're, like, notorious for riding the bicycles, I'll tell you what. I just can't do it. Y'all can get the idea, though.
What the hell do you turn into? Dale Gribble right there? You said, boy, I tell you what, you know, my man, them dang people are riding them a shoot. I was like, what the hell?
I say, son, you can't ride that bicycle in the battle. I say, son, get that bicycle off the battlefield. I say, look at this. I say, take some cover. How about it? Yeah. What are you trying to get? A whooping or something? Yeah, I say.
Man, he's going off on that one. Also, by the way, unfortunately, the Russians did hit a large gas facility near to the city of Dnipro, and of course, it created a significant fireball because of the rupture of the gas pipe.
You know, there's a guy back in the day called Gas Pipe. He used to be a bastard in New York, by the way. That guy was a terrible guy, I'll tell you.
Really?
Yeah, you don't know about Gas Pipe? He was in a mob.
Oh, that's probably why I don't know about him. I wasn't affiliated with those folks.
Yeah, well, I'm not affiliated either. I'm just saying. Well,
we can also see the fire from here.
Our names are Enforcer, but we're not affiliated, okay?
Also, everyone said that's Boomhauer. I got the name wrong. Sorry, everyone.
I was doing Foghorn Leghorn. I wasn't doing Boomhauer.
No, I was doing Boomhauer when I said, man, you know, you just gotta go and get them dang shoot. You know, when I did that, I was trying to do a Boomhauer thing. But anyways, moving on from that and down into Zaporizhia, we also got to see another Russian HQ getting hit again by guided bombs. The Ukrainians love the guided bombs. They are using them significantly now in airstrikes. Here's another example of them dropping GBU-62s on the Russians. And what the hell was that? But anyways, they hit the target and wiped out the headquarters.
So I said, that's a strange name. Well, it wasn't so strange if you know this guy's backstory, why he was called Gas Pipe. It was pretty ominous why he was called Gas Pipe. You can kind of take a clue what the mob used to do to people that didn't pay up their protection racket money. They used to, get the little gas pipe and kind of go to town and stuff.
Dang, that's kind of dark. Honestly, bro, that's like an L-take. But anyways, moving on from that.
Yeah, it was an L-take for the people that got the gas pipe, for sure.
Honestly, I mean, it's business. It's not personal. It's business. But anyways, we also get to see the 39th hitting Russian forces near to the Dnipro River estuary today as well. Doesn't estuary sound so nice? It sounds like you got to be harvesting oysters. The Ukrainians are out here harvesting souls, as you can see in this clip. Absolutely obliterating.
Obliterating. Let's see. Marion Deemer said, "Do you guys think the Russian soldiers know they're only cannon fodder for Putin?" Honestly, I would say the ones that the word probably gets around, but they can't really say it though because if they say it, they might get in some trouble with their commander that might end up doing something terrible to them. So they probably try to keep it quiet. But I'm sure they know. Now, there's probably some ignorant Russians that probably sign up falling for the propaganda that don't really know the truth of it. But I would say the majority of people probably have an idea. It would be my guess.
I'd have to say most of them probably know at this point. But with that, that is the end of the clip from Kherson. And also, folks, not to create an abrupt end to the show, but there's really no other way to do it. We have run out of news. There is no speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, but that is all of the news that we have had over this 24-hour cycle. I've got to thank each and every one of y'all so much for watching our news segment so far. I hope that y'all stick around because we're going to be getting into the question segment where we get to talk to all of y'all. And what a fun segment it is. Over the course of 2 hours, we have had 70,000 people watch this stream. Holy moly! And a big viewership of 11.3 thousand people. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of pepperoni. And I hope that y'all have enjoyed. I hope that y'all did. Please make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like and comment and all that. We're almost up to 484,000 subscribers. Can we hit it? I hope we do. I hope we do. If you hit the subscribe button right now, you might. You might just hit it. But nevertheless, it is time for us to get on into all of those great questions that we've been able to get in the super chats and the live chats. And so, without further ado, Matthew, take it away.
All right, so it is now time for the most anticipated part of the stream. It is the final question segment of the night. And also, I got to say, Zelensky, we need the speech again. Honestly, I'm missing the speeches. I think we've been out of the speech for like 3 days now at this point. So it's been a minute. Say what now?
A long time. It's been an incredibly long time.
Oh, yes, indeed. A very long time. Now, I understand why he didn't do it while he was in Washington. Obviously, he was tied up there. He was on the plane, etc. But we need the speech, man. Like, he's been doing a speech for so long. He's got to give us a speech, I tell you. But anyways, jumping into our final Super Chat segments here. This one, the first one, goes to Waba. And Waba puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Waba, as well, for that support and being a longtime channel legend. He said, "I'm also annoyed AF."
And I would have to say, I thank you for support. And I'd have to say, Wubba, that sometimes people are just annoyed. But you know, sometimes you just gotta pull through. We gotta pick ourselves up by the bootstraps, you know, as they say, the old saying goes, and just try and pull through. But a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running, Wubba. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to say Wubba has got the news, or as some people in New York would say, make sure you wear a Wubba. but beyond that, a big thanks to you so much once again. That does address that somewhat well. And with that, that was a stupid
Who said
joke.
that?
Well, dude, that's just the New York accent, man. Like nobody said that.
I thought you meant like you said people in New York say this.
Man,
like,
maybe Gas Pipe said that. Maybe Gas Pipe said that at some point. I don't know. Like, I'm not ruling it out. Like, you know, anyone could have said that at some point. You know, the New York accent, it does crazy things to people. But beyond that, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support, Wubba. You were an old guard and a channel legend, and I love to know that you're still here with us years later, enjoying this show and helping us to keep this thing running. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to another channel legend, by the way. It is Marion Deemer yet again. And Marion put in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support yet again. And we do appreciate that very much. And Marion said, you guys are heading towards the 500,000 mark. And congrats. Very well deserved.
Hey, and you know it's crazy, actually, Marion Deemer. 500,000 is actually within reach. 15,000 or so away. It's actually 17, but who's counting that? Who's counting? Nobody is. Nobody's counting. I'm not counting. It's technically 16 because we're like right next to 484 right now. But still, who in the hell's counting? Not me. Not me. But beyond that, I do thank you massively for the support and enjoying this channel. And I also got to say a huge, massive thanks to you for having been around way back when this channel was but a fledgling. We had so little subscribers back then, and in a small cup of coffee, the price of a cup of coffee a month went a long way. And here we are, so much many years later, 3.5 years later, technically 4 years almost since the start of the channel, and we're still here. A lot of channels have lived and died in the amount of time that we've been on air. As a matter of fact, what's even crazier is that in the amount of time that we've been on air covering this news, people who were watching this channel had children at that point, and those children are about to turn in a couple of months 4 years old. That's just really wild to think that we've been on air that long, that that's the case. Because I remember some people were telling us here on this channel long time ago, years ago, hey, I just had a kid. And we were like, hey, congratulations, you had a baby. That's great to hear. And it's even crazier to think that a lot of those folks who said that, their kid is old enough to walk and talk now. That's really honestly kind of weird when you put it into that kind of a time frame, how long we've been on air. And we're so happy to know that folks like you, Marion Deemer, and Wubba, and BC Skyman, and so many others, millions of others actually, have been with us for all these years, enjoying our news and enjoying our coverage of the news from around the world every day. I hope that we still retain the kind of quality and coverage that we have been doing for the entire time. I hope that it's still up to snuff. We always try and make the thing better with each passing month and every single passing year. And I got to thank you so much for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to keep this channel running, and we would have never been able to make it possible in the first place. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, we did grab Old Warrior Super Chat earlier, but we need to grab one from the chat on that one. He's saying that he forgot to say take one from the chat. I can't remember if we grab one or not, but we will oblige Old Warrior and grab one from the chat. And this one is going to go to Valsur, who said, which air defense system does Poland have?
They have a lot of them, technically. They have like a metric load of them. Let me go show you Polish armed forces equipment. Let me go to this tab and let me scroll all the way down. Whew, it's a long, exhaustive list. Poland is the country that said, why can't we just have one of everything? Like, man, like, they're that guy who went up to the Burger King man and did that song where you're like, I need a double Whopper King. and that's not everything. Like, they have everything, literally. Look at this. Like, this is just the light mortar section. They have the LRM VZ-99 from the Czech Republic. They have the LMP 2017 from Poland. They also have the LMN 60 from Poland. They have the M98 from Poland, the WZ-3843 from the Soviet Union, and the 2B11 from the Soviet Union. They also have the M120 rack, nice rack, from Poland. That's their mortar system, self-propelled mortar. Then they have howitzers. They have some made in South Korea. They have some made in Poland, some from the Czech Republic, some from Communist Poland. Then they have rocket artillery, South Korea, the United States, Poland, and the Czechs, all under one roof. They are like the Thailand of Europe in terms of their arms procurement. They literally go around to arms shows, and it's like there's Zelensky, but with an unlimited budget. They're like, I'll have that, and I'll have some of this, and some of that, and then they just get it all, and they bring it back to Poland, and it becomes a part of the armed forces. I mean, look at the main battle tanks alone. K2 Black Panthers from South Korea, M1 Abrams from America, Leopard 2s from Germany, and they also have their own variants of them. They have a lot of different variants of Leopard 2s, and they also have the PT-91 Twardy. That is 4 different countries worth of main battle tanks in one country. Like, it's like, as far as logistics are concerned, this is an absolute nightmare. But in terms of like watching a military operate and seeing how much varied equipment they have, it's actually really impressive. Also, I have to show you all the Polish Leopard 2. It's the Leopard 2 PL. And I actually think it's one of the cooler looking ones. But I have to find it, and that's the issue. Where is it? Come on, come on. There's got to be a PL in here somewhere. It's called a PL. The PL stands for Poland, by the way. Oh, dang. They introduced them in 2019, and they were so cool when they brought them in. I was like, wow, that is the neatest looking Leopard 2, because of the armor package that it got. I'm going to find this. I have to show this to y'all. Here we are. That is the Leopard 2 PL. Notice the difference in the armor.
I like that a lot. The Leopard is just such a sleek-looking tank. Like, this thing really looks sleek.
Yeah, you know what? Something else that's pretty neat is that this tank in particular in the picture, that little symbol right there is of the Polish 1st Brigade, the 1st Armored Brigade. And let me go pull that up, because that is actually a really cool unit with a very interesting storied history. So this is the 1st Armored Division. Well, actually, we're not looking for the division. We're looking for the brigade. Dang it. I forgot. Sorry. Let me go get that. Here we go. No, we're not looking for that one. That's not it either. What the hell? Wait. Oh my God. Let me go find it. Does it say it here somewhere? Oh, hold up. Polish Armored Brigades. It's the 1st. Let's see. Armored Brigades. Let me go pull that up. And we ought to eventually find it. The 1st Warsaw Armored Brigade. That's what it should be. But that's not it. That's not their symbol. At least I don't believe it is. Let me go. The 1st Warsaw Armored Brigade.
Isn't that the people that was like Berlin to Warsaw in one tank?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. That was called the Wehrmacht, and they were a totally different group. But
Ugh.
then sadly, I can't show you all the little emblem that's on the side of their tanks because it's not the Starbucks mermaid. It's a totally different thing. But for some reason, they won't show a good picture of the emblem. So, oh, here it is. There we are. That's what it is. This unit is actually something of a spiritual successor of the 1st Armored Division of Poland that existed in World War II, which was involved in some of the larger battles in Europe during its time. Like, for example, the Battle of, let's see, Operation Market Garden, the Normandy landings, the Battle of the Bulge. Generally, it was somewhere around or present in a lot of those major battles within Northern Europe. It's a very cool sort of a brigade, and it's a very neat sort of a spiritual successor to that division because once the World War II ended, the 1st Armored Division actually got absorbed into the People's Republic of Poland, and the Soviets completely dissolved it and purged most everyone who was involved in it. So they weren't really around to survive into the present day, but the 1st Armored Brigade is their spiritual successor. So pretty cool, actually. But anyways, with that, I hope that does explain that well. That's what that Leopard 2 PL is a part of. It's part of the 1st Warsaw Armored Brigade. And I love the PL. The PL is my favorite variant. I think it's even better than the 2A6s, which are the more like the Leopard 2E, like with the very angular turret cheeks with the spaced armor. I think that this type of spaced armor is even cooler looking.
Man, I'll be honest with you. I just like Poland as a country. Like Poland's military is top. Their country is really clean. Like honestly, like out of all the European countries, like Poland would be near the top of my list. I'd probably be like Austria, Poland, and beyond that, honestly, it might be back to maybe Britain, but I don't know. Like these days, I think Austria, Poland, maybe Switzerland. Those would be like the top of the list. But they happen to be expensive, so that's a bit of a problem. But if it wasn't for the money and the money wasn't an issue, I would say one of those.
Wow, the Leopard 2 A8. Man, soon they're going to get up to the Leopard 2 A10. But I like that they added a trophy system to this Leopard, and they also added a remote machine gun turret with a 50 cal on it. So that's actually pretty impressive, really, that they have all that. That is one hell of a tank, really, because this thing is protected against ATGMs, and nobody has to be outside of the turret to operate the turret machine gun. So that's actually really nice as far as like tank operability and survivability of the crew. So that's really cool, actually. I never really heard a lot about the 2A8. I heard that the 2A7 was pretty much the thing that Crossman Wegman was trying to push these days. Never heard that they tried to make a 2.8, and I have not heard of anyone buying it so far either, from what I know. So that's interesting. But anyways, enough about the Leopard 2s. They're cool, and we'll just leave it at that. So beyond that, I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope we were able to address your super chat, or live chat more so, sponsored by Old Warrior, incredibly well. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. Also, wait a minute, hang on. We didn't even get to the air defense systems. Hold up. We got completely sidetracked by the whole other stuff. So let me go Polish Armed Forces equipment. Let me go get the air defense systems really quickly and go list them off. So now we got to go down the whole list. Look away, folks, so you don't get nauseous. And oh, we're almost there. I think, yeah, here we are. So they're going to be introducing these soon. These are actually a British air defense system. This is the Sky Saber. The Polish are going to call it the Naru once it enters service with them. It's a short, let's see, it's a SHORAD, which I think stands for short range air defense, something like that. I think that's actually what it stands for. Yeah, I'm just, I'm just a genius that way. It stands for short range air defense. The shore is for short, and then the AD is for air defense. For some reason, I was thinking that all the letters had a specific word for them. But anyways, they also have the Malanaru, the Poprad. The Poprad's probably the cheapest of them all. It's technically just an MRAP that has a Piorin cradle on the back that allows for them to fire all the Piorins simultaneously, but then they have to hand reload all of them. And then they also have the OSAs, which are from the Soviet Union. Generally, you can see them here. They're still in service, though, and they're still somewhat effective. And then they also have the Kub, which is Soviet era. So they're rapidly developing their air defense, but most of it is based around the short-range air defense category and not necessarily the medium to long-range air defense. That's generally expected to be provided by other nations. But we do have here some Gush guns, classic Gush guns. We also have the Shilkas. The Polish Shilkas, from what I understand, are actually the modified variant. I think it's something like the ZSU 23 something, and they actually have Piorins mounted onto the turret. So it has the gun-based air defense and technically short-range air defense, man-pad style air defense attached. And then they also have this thing, which is the Gush gun connected to a pretty cool looking truck. So technically a technical. So those don't really do, none of the air defense guns really count for anything, but they're still cool. They also have some radars, most of them are Soviet vintage. Some of them are a little bit more modern, and that's generally it. Beyond that, they have some Apaches, and those are always great. And they also have some Hinds. Those are also pretty cool. But anyways, I hope that does answer your question well. And a big thanks to you once again, Old Warrior, for sponsoring a live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And that's the most Enforcer Matt poll I've ever seen right there, man. I think that's the most Enforcer Matt one. I've never seen one like it. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on here. Also, by the way, to take a break from our super chats, we do have some breaking news coming out right now, by the way. We're currently seeing that right now, and this is not like crazy news right here, but it is something notable. It looks like we have gotten our first airspace incursion near the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone since the meeting that took place between Putin and the U.S. president that we saw a short while ago. NORAD is reporting that it detected and tracked an IL-20 Coot operating in the ADIZ, which was apparently today, and it looks like the Russian military aircraft remained in international airspace, and they were able to shoo it away and get it out of the area. So there's the Coot right there on the screen. So apparently that thing right there tried to probe the ADIZ near Alaska. So that is some breaking news right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
That thing has got a schnoz up there, man. Look at that nose cone. How old is this thing anyways? Holy smokes. These things were manufactured in 1968?
Damn, that is a Coot.
Damn, that thing is
I'm
a
joking.
Coot.
I'm joking, by the way. I'm joking. Someone's going to be like, hey, wait a minute. I was born that year. I'm joking. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
We're just kidding. We're just kidding. Everyone's young. Remember, everyone's young. But that's interesting to hear. Nothing shocking, though. But it is showing that the Russians are back to their usual tricks. Nothing new with that. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Very interesting news to hear. And also, there are only 19 of these things that were ever built. Interesting. And they're also specifically built as surveillance reconnaissance aircraft. That's very interesting. Putin probably said, those F-22s are interesting. Go to Anchorage. And they're trying to look at the F-22s at Elmendorf, maybe. I'm just kidding about that. They're probably looking at something else here near Nome, Alaska, possibly. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And it was also developed out of the IL-18. How old is this thing? The first flight was in 1957? So this is really just a modification of that. So really the actual airframe itself is from the 50s. It's 50s vintage.
Wow, that is old as hell. And look at all those fumes coming out of it, too. What an old, nasty plane.
It is vintage dated Parmesan. Like, oh my God. But you know, I can't really diss on it too much because I'm about to blow everyone away. The C-130 took its first flight in 1954.
Yeah, but the C-130, though, is like classic. Like this thing right here. Like we've chosen to keep this thing around because we love it.
Man, honestly, the C-130 is goated. I don't think it can ever get that old. Also, the B-52 is ancient as well. Do y'all know when it took its first flight? I actually don't know specifically. It took its first flight in 1952, 73 years ago. This thing is as old as the Korean War.
Yeah, but this thing is like, we love this thing too. Like we make such good stuff, we have to keep it around for ages. We make such good stuff. But that's not the reason the Russians keep it around. They keep their stuff around because they're going broke.
Man, we keep the B-52 around because we figured out it's a missile bus. Let me go show y'all what a modern loadout for a B-52 looks like. Because they don't carpet bomb anymore. They do the cool thing called standoff ordnance launches, which are just the neatest thing ever. Let me see if I can show y'all a combat loadout for a B-52 in the present day. Oh, come on, there's got to be a clip of it somewhere. Oh, dagnabbit. Oh, you can kind of see it there. There's the cradles. They just attach these things to the wings, and they also load up cruise missiles into the bomb base. So this thing can fire off dozens of cruise missiles per bomber from hundreds, if not 1,000 miles away at maximum at their targets. So in the modern day, these things are actually still relevant because they evolved how they operate massively. They don't directly drop a bomb on anything anymore. They fire off cruise missiles from about 1,000 miles away. But still, for that reason, these things are goated. Also, for that reason, they have all lost their nuclear carrier designations and qualifications. They're not qualified to carry any nuclear weapons any longer, so they only carry conventional weaponry. I believe the B-1 Lancer and the B-2 Spirit are the only strategic bombers that are nuclear capable in the U.S. arsenal currently, if I'm not mistaken. So, interesting stuff with that. And you just gotta love American Christmases. Have y'all ever looked at them, like the ALCM missile? Have y'all ever looked at that? Look at that. It's gorgeous.
That is nice.
It's nice. It's nice. Or better yet, have y'all ever seen the even smaller one, the JASSM? Look at that little thing.
That's nice too. I like that.
It's wonderful. It's amazing. Let me see if I can show y'all one that's painted up normally. This one's actually next to an F-35. These things are just wonderful. American missiles, design-wise, they go hard. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next super chat, this one goes to, guess who? It is LC39A yet again. He is throwing in another massive support, by the way. He's trying to buy stock up in here, I'm telling you what. He puts in a $137 donation, and thank you very much, LC39A, for the second largest support of the night. Actually, the first right there. That's the second support of the night, though. But he said, you're counting, and you count.
Hey, thank you so much for the massive support, LC39A, and thank you for counting, and thank you for saying that we count. You count, and I suppose we count as well. Maybe we're all counting. But I'm not Count Dracula. But a big thanks to you for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who helped make this thing possible and help us to keep this channel running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be counting. Well, we wouldn't be able to be counting to this day. So a huge, massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And so with that, it is time for us to get on into the next one. But a massive thanks to you so much once again. Before we get on to the next one, Matthew, let's address this poll. What are people saying about this poll?
So looking here at the poll, it says, what would be your top choice to move to in Europe? Because I just happened to bring that up, so let's see what the people got to say. It looks like the top choice, barely, is Finland and Sweden, with 33%. 32% said Switzerland, 21% said Poland, and only 14% said Austria, which is kind of shocking me, as Austria is beautiful. But I would say, generally speaking, I would probably pick Switzerland, just because I obviously, I love all these countries. Like, I like them all. They all have their own unique thing going on. But Finland, Sweden, they're a little bit close to Russia. I'll be honest with you, a little bit close. And I would personally like to stay out of there, at least for right now. So I'd probably skip on those just for that reason. But I love Finland and I love Sweden, two cool countries. And I would probably honestly pick Switzerland, just because they're kind of neutral right now, at least kind of somewhat, a little bit. I would probably pick Switzerland. They've got a nice surroundings. Now, it's a little bit expensive to live there, yes, but in this poll right here, money's not a problem, at least hypothetically. So I'll probably pick Switzerland. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, it looks like at least most of these options are kind of Germanic in a sense. And generally out of those four, I would pick Switzerland. But you know the most Germanic place that I choose to live in, Matthew?
What would be that?
Qingdao in the Shandong province of China. You know why? Because it used to be a German treaty colony, and you can definitely tell. Because let me see if there's a picture here on Google Images of this. The whole center of Qingdao is actually German in architectural style, because they were pretty much the ones who built Qingdao in the first place.
Interesting. I didn't even know that, to be honest.
Yeah, so like it's really interesting. It was taken away from them after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. It was stripped from them, and I believe it became a part of the Republic of China. But the downtown is extremely Germanic, and this is nothing that the Chinese built in the modern day. This is all from the pretty much treaty port German colonial era in China. Crazy deal that happened during that time. But let me see if I can show you. Here's another picture of their cathedral. Very German. I mean, that's the most German cathedral you can get for the most part, is outside of Germany. Stuff's wild. Like, it's like, wow, that's crazy. It's kind of like how you can find British buildings in Hong Kong, to a sense, because that was also a treaty port as well. And another thing that's interesting, did you know this, Matthew? But at the time, Shanghai was neither Chinese, nor was it anything else. It was its own thing. It was its own country, technically.
Wow, that's crazy, honestly. That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, it was an independent country run by a mercantile commission that was pretty much pioneered by Americans and also British merchants. And so during World War II, that was actually something that saved it from the original Japanese invasion of the area. The Japanese did not invade the international treaty city of Shanghai, at least initially. They only did that later, I think at the outbreak of war with the United States in 1941, and also some other things as well. Pretty wild stuff, actually. And I think there's still some remnants of that in Shanghai to this day. And also, there's this cool thing, folks, that you'll probably have never heard about. It's called getting Shanghai, which means that someone puts you to sleep using some medicinal forms, and then they force you to work on a ship for the rest of your life. That's what getting Shanghai means.
Damn.
Really weird
They
thing.
got a new term for that in America. They got a new term for that.
What do they call it? What do they call it?
He calls getting diddied. Oh, I'm just joking. I'm just joking, by the way. Just a joke. Just a joke.
Bro, they call that getting Diddy high. Man,
I'll tell you what. Jeez.
Man. But still, Shanghai is actually a pretty interesting place. The river is poo-poo brown, though, and a lot of the water around here is like, ooh, I wonder why. It's not like China's like a massive polluter or anything like that. But there are still some British and foreign elements left around the city from the time that it was an international treaty city. It was kind of like the free city of Danzig, but in Asia. So pretty cool fact about them. But anyways, with that, I'll be honest with y'all folks, don't y'all hate that there's like almost no countries like that left? Like one of the last holdouts of that sort of era is Singapore, which generally wasn't even around during that time. They kind of got kicked out of Malaysia in the 60s, and then they became their own thing. So it's kind of a shame that there's no other city-states that exist like that anymore, like free cities, because they're so neat. Like, they end up becoming their own thing with their own culture, their own economy, their own customs, laws. It's just a really neat sort of a thing that doesn't really exist in most places of the world anymore. I feel like we've lost a lot of uniqueness and identity with the loss of treaty ports and cities like Shanghai, and the fact that it became just another part of communist China. But anyways.
Oh, now I got something real quick before we move on here. I want to ask something to our European viewers that watch the show. Now, one thing I want to ask is I say that Switzerland's unaffordable, which generally I think I've seen largely it is, but generally across Europe, like we're talking about Austria, Switzerland, Finland, Sweden, is it generally affordable over there to live like on a normal income in those countries? Because here in America, if I'm sure the Europeans are familiar with it, especially on this channel because people follow the news, but the U.S. housing affordability just hit a record low today, according to research that's being conducted, and also the bankruptcies are the highest they've been since like the plague hit the world, like back in 2021. So we're having a rough time. Like, I'll be honest, America's having a little bit of a rough time over here with the economy and also the job situation, things like that. But what is the situation in Europe? Is I rarely ever get to hear about that. And I just hear about what's going on here in the United States. So I'm curious, what do people say from Europe?
It's worse, actually, statistically.
Worse?
Yeah, like in Britain, houses, I think, are even more unaffordable than they are in America, like to own. Like to rent, there's plenty to rent, but to actually buy and own, insanely expensive.
That's a shame. That means it's a worldwide problem if that is indeed the case. I don't know what the hell is going on, but it seems like it's just going down. It's not going up when it comes to like fixing that problem. It's actually getting bad. It's not political at all. It's just like it's simply bad. Like the jobs kind of flatlining, the income for people is staying steady or if not dropping in some cases, and the cost of living, housing, everything is like going through the roof. The healthcare is going through the roof. It's just crazy, honestly. Like it seems like it might be worldwide now that you mentioned it.
So the one thing that actually is causing that, especially in the Western world, is the fact that there are companies that go around, because there's not really any regulation that exists on this yet. They just go around either building developments or buying out current developments at extremely high rates, and then only allowing them to be rented. And then also, if they're allowing any to be sold, since they generally regulate the amount of houses for sale on the open market, they're able to really set whatever price they like. And that's actually what's causing, especially in Britain and Ireland, a lot of the massive skyrocketing prices in housing are these large investment firms that are pretty much going through and buying entire cities pretty much in terms of housing and then regulating the supply and demand on their own accord to make as much profit as possible. That's what's also happening in the United States these days, but not as to an extreme degree as it is in the UK and Ireland. That's a totally different animal. It's worse over there. But if there was some sort of regulation on that, that would really fix a lot of the issue, because they're the ones that are generally jacking up the prices. Like, that's not a political thing. That's just a fact from studies and research done. That's the reason why a lot of housing prices are going absolutely out of control. So there has to be some kind of regulation.
Honestly. Really need the regulation. They need it fast too. I'm seeing some people here saying some different things in the chat. Alex77 said in Korea, I got a 3-bedroom apartment for 400 a month. That is crazy, honestly. That is insane. Like $400 a month in America in most renting markets won't even get you a studio apartment. Like $400 a month is unheard of. For a 3-bedroom in America, that's going to be somewhere in the range of 2,500 to $3,000 a month for a 3-bedroom, depending on where you're at. And that's just the average based on the numbers. Also, by the way, I'm seeing Brian Gonzalez said unemployed software engineer since November of last year. Also, another major problem: people that have degrees in education are even having hard times finding jobs now. Like people stay unemployed for 6 to 12 months while they're trying to find a new job, and that's terrible because obviously, like people like Brian who are clearly educated and they have a lot of education, they've gone through the schooling, they've done the process, then to find themselves in a position where they can't find work, that's tough. Like that's a bad situation.
Yeah, it's a crazy sort of a situation the economy finds itself in today, especially on housing. Housing, honestly, folks, is the easiest one to fix because there has never been any regulation on the books. There's never needed to be any regulation on the books. But this is a serious, massive problem that's currently being faced, especially for up and coming folks who are trying to get starter houses or really get any kind of a house. They're completely unaffordable. Nobody can afford them. If there was some kind of regulation that stopped these investment firms from buying up all of these houses in mass and regulating the supply, then the prices would immediately drop. To be entirely honest, there should be a law on, I would say this, I'm not being political, folks, but if I was the president of the United States, I would immediately start to sponsor or encourage a representative or a senator to get a bill on the floor that would regulate that corporations and private entities such as those are not able to buy or own, although I know that there's some situations with that because corporations are considered individuals under U.S. federal law, I believe, and not a separate entity beyond an individual. But a corporation should not be able to buy and own at a single time a large amount of houses with a specific intent of holding them off the market and rapidly inflating the prices of the houses that are on the market that they're selling or renting. That should be completely forbidden, and there should be some way that that bill is written up to ensure that most houses are owned by single individuals or families that are bought and sold amongst individuals and not corporations, because that's just absolutely running the system rampant at this point, and that's why the housing situation is absolutely out of control.
Yeah, honestly, I would say something needs to happen. That sounds like a good idea, at least on its face. It might have some facets to it that might be a little bit difficult, but it sounds like a good start. Something though, it's like something needs to happen. It's like the people here, like obviously we make a lot more money than the Russians do. Like the average salary in Russia is pitiful, like compared to what the average American makes. But the catch is though, in America, the cost of living is rising so fast, it's going to end up outweighing the money that you're making in America before long. It's going to probably catch up to Russia one of these days when it comes to the disparity between your salary and the cost of living. It's probably getting there.
Yeah, it really is. Honestly, it's a very tough situation in that regard. But with that, I hope we address that the best we can. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so our next super chat goes to Glock Who's There LSA, who's also a channel legend, by the way. He puts in a $20 donation. He said, Watumka Volunteer Fire Department donation and LSA.
Hey.
And clearly, sir, you've done a lot of research. I tell you what, you've done a lot of research. I must applaud you, by the way. Tier 1 stalker, I must say. We have a couple of Tier 1 stalkers in here, actually, that are very proud of the term. So if you want to adopt it, go right ahead, my friend. But thank you very much for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you massively for the support, Glock Who's There. You've done a lot of research. A lot, I tell you. We are from that little town right there. That's where we came from. And I got to thank you so much for the support and throwing that in and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you deserve the title with honor. Tier 1 stalker. And so that, a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Thomas D'Orazio, and Thomas puts in a 20, and thank you very much, good sir, as well for that support. He said, if they run low on fuel, what happened this winter in places like Yakutsk, and will they have an internal refugee crisis in Russia?
Technically, usable fuel oil is different than heating gas because they use natural gas for heating in Russia. So the heating systems generally shouldn't be affected too much unless if it's connected to a central heating duct or system that controls the heating for the entire city. which is usually run off of oil, then they would have a huge issue. But technically, most of them, if they're running off of some sort of gas heating system, they shouldn't have that much of an issue, because the natural gas isn't necessarily the issue that Russia is having right now. It's more so the fuel shortage that they're having for vehicles and such things. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least from what I would understand. There shouldn't be any massive crisis along those lines. So heating shouldn't be an issue, but eating is going to be the issue. So a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $20 support from Sparky107107, and Sparky puts in a $20 donation, and thank you, good sir, as well for that support. He said, Russia is just checking air defenses of NATO countries, and I think Putin knows he is probably going to be a goner soon from illness, and he wants World War III to go out as a martyr with the Russian people.
I mean, possibly he may be. I mean, he is clearly not well within his mind at the moment. That's quite clear from an analysis side of things. Not a lot that he does actually makes sense in the bigger picture. But I do thank you for the support, and that's entirely possible. I can't rule that out. So it is a notion that we have to be somewhat considerate of. But at the same time, we can't completely give in with that in mind and just keep giving stuff to him. So it's a little bit of a tough one to figure out. But I do thank you for the support and help this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep it running. Also, I saw someone, bootlegger said, the enforcer about the housing regulation thing. That becomes political fast. Here's the thing, though. Like, I understand that might actually be somewhat political, maybe. But the thing that I think, though, is that sometimes we can't always say that something is political, because there are different interest groups that may disagree with that. At the end of the day, the United States of America is a government, in theory. Well, in actual practice, it's supposed to be a government that is run generally by the people through their elected representatives. And the fact of the matter is that they are not being represented well, and their best interests are not being carried out in the terms of numbers of people who are benefiting from this current situation with how the housing market is working because of the lack of regulation. That is something that is inherently damaging, not really more so any idea of a classist thing of, oh, eat the rich or anything crazy like that. That is just generally hurting the overwhelming number of citizenry that have to have a house. They can't afford them. It's something that is hurting tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Americans right now. And that is something that generally is not good for society's sake in the long term. So that's what I would generally have to say. Maybe it is political, perhaps, on its face, but at the same time, the government is supposed to be ensuring that there is the best benefit possible for our society. And the best benefit would to be ensuring that there are good paying jobs that are out there available, and we're always trying to pursue and encourage companies to either come to America or pop up in America that produce well-paying jobs. We also want to make sure that housing is as cheap as possible. Food and groceries are also as cheap as possible, and generally public utilities and infrastructure are up to the highest standard possible with the kind of funding that we can allocate, and to also provide as many government services as we possibly can for the benefit of the citizenry. That is generally a very important thing that I think the country should be working towards, because if we're not working towards the common benefit of the citizenry, then what is the government working towards at all? That's the whole point the government exists, at least in my opinion, in my theory. And of course, I also have to say this. That does not mean that, like, before people start taking that one running with it, I'm not saying that, oh, tax the rich, eat the rich, all that sort of thing. I'm not saying that at all. I don't get to that extreme. Because at the same time, these corporations and incentivized, generally competitiveness is also beneficial. But we also have to regulate that to the point that it doesn't run out of control and end up becoming too good of a thing and then start hurting society as a result, like it currently is right now. So I hope that addresses my standpoint on that somewhat well with the whole housing regulation thing, because at some point, not like we're never going to delve into domestic politics, but at some point, a spade is a spade, and we have to call it for what it is. If the housing is unacceptable generally because of that one issue, and that's one of the main driving issues, then that's one that has to be fixed. There's really no other way around it. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a big thanks to you once again for joining this channel, and of course, bringing up your concerns. And I hope I addressed them well, at least from my standpoint. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Duncan VR, another channel legend, by the way. He puts in at 22 Australian, and thank you very much, Duncan, as well, for that support. He said, Enforcer, voice of President T, you're gambling with World War VII. You're playing cards. Enforcer Matt, voice of President Z, I am not playing cards. I have a royal flush. No speech. Matt to do the President Z speech. Oh, man, that fly. That's a lot of instructions right there. What do you make of
That's
that?
a lot. That's like a
I don't know how to take it.
screenplay. Like that is a screenplay, nearly. I gotta thank you greatly for the support. You're helping this channel to keep on running. But I thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep it rolling. And also, Matthew, do a little Zelensky. It's just a little bit.
I would like to see if you will give me the chance to get into the voice. We're trying to go to Kucheriv Yar and roam the streets and slide the block. But, you know, I'm not here to play cards. I am here with royal flush. They say, flush the toilet, gold toilet, flush. Have a nice clean royal flush. I don't know where to go with this, but, you know, Kucheriv Yar. I don't know where to even go with that, to be honest with you.
Well, I thank you massively for the support, Kucheriv Yar, and I hope we did the best we could on that. And a massive thanks to you once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. Also, really quickly, I saw some people saying this, and I got to address it. It's something that a lot of people just don't understand, because there's been a lot of information about this that's not true. Keith Luke said, at what point does any government regulation benefit anybody? Oh, buddy. There's a lot of times that it hasn't done well, but there's a lot of times that it's done great. And I'll explain one that will affect you every single day that you don't know about because nobody talks about it, that does us a great deal of good. And that is the regulation of agriculture in this country. Agriculture, as it started to exist at the turn of the last century, started to become something that was heavily mechanized, and for that reason, your average farmer could not keep up. So a lot of farmers, especially after World War I, started to go bankrupt, and the government was not regulating anything at that point. Everything was generally considered through that period of time to be a laissez-faire economy, meaning that the government took a hands-off approach, and whatever happened, happened. They did not do anything to get involved. So that generally resulted in the financial depression of 1929, or the Great Depression of 1929, which was the worst economic depression seen in the nation's history. So, as a result of that depression, the already generally bankrupting farmers almost all went bankrupt. Everything became worthless overnight as well because of a flood of supply onto the market, because people were going, oh my God, you know, the debt collectors are coming because the banks are collapsing. I've got to be able to pay off these loans that I have to run these farms. So let me just pour all my produce onto the markets to try and make some money. And that resulted in the price of every single food item crashing overnight. Everything became worthless because there was so much food on the market. So the new FDR government came in under the promise of the New Deal, and they brought forward a heavy amount of regulation in the agricultural sector. And what that meant, generally, was that the government would ensure that everyone, all the farmers, generally had a living, at least some kind, but at the same time, they were also going to make sure that there weren't so many crops hitting the market because these people were trying to make a living that they were going to end up crashing the cost of the crops and end up bankrupting all of them. So what the government has been doing since then is that they've been paying farmers throughout the country whenever they see, oh, it looks like there's going to be way too much produce and this is going to start crashing prices, they just start paying farmers to go destroy their crops. So that way they can regulate the price. Those farmers still get paid the value of their crops, so they're still in business, they still have a job and a living, but the other farmers are also able to go take their crops that they were not paid to destroy to the market and make the money off of it. So in a sense, it keeps the entire agricultural industry running. If we had not done that, the agricultural industry in this country would have completely collapsed after 1929. Literally, I'm not even kidding. It was near apocalyptic with what was about to happen. It was the first time in America that anyone had actually seen that a nationwide famine might have actually started to grip the nation due to people having a lack of money to buy crops, and also later on due to the fact that agriculture was quite literally about to implode on itself because the banks were about to go and take the pretty much the entirety of the farmers of America out to the cleaners. So that is one way, at least as far as I can explain, the government regulation has actually benefited you greatly, because if it wasn't for that, your parents most likely wouldn't have been alive, or you wouldn't have been alive to be here today asking that question about why government regulation, when government regulation has benefited anyone. We most likely would have seen that a lot of people would have starved to death back then. So that's a big one. Another big one actually is the regulation of the airlines. A lot of people don't know about this, but before the 1980s, the airlines were regulated. Don't you all remember? I'm sure y'all have heard of this. Look at how luxurious the airlines were of the 1970s. The golden age of airlines. Let me go pull that up really quickly. Let me go get it. Let me see. A travel advert. Oh yeah, like this. Look, there was a whole meal. They had a whole real meal on the plane and giant luxurious seats. That's because of government regulation. The government heavily regulated airlines up until the 80s. And because of that regulation, they actually regulated how many seats there could be on a plane. And that also is what heavily spurned the huge travel rush of the 50s, 60s, and 70s that generally created the airlines as the major transporters of America, is because the governments regulated the cap price of the tickets, and they also regulated how many people could be on board a plane. And those numbers were very, very conservative, meaning that the seats were larger and more luxurious because it wouldn't make any sense for them to make the seats more cramped with less leg room, less arm room, less room in general, is because they could only fit so many people on the plane because of the government regulations. Nowadays, after the 80s, a lot of stuff was unregulated. The railroads were unregulated in the Staggers Act of 1980. Also, the airlines were unregulated as well. And since then, a lot of people are always talking about, man, everything used to be better back then. And that's because the government actually used to step in and regulate things to say, no, you can't go to the extreme length of making profits for the shareholders at every degree, to the point that people are literally shoving their knees into the back of the seats in front of them. You've got to have this many seats on a plane, and this is the max cap price of a ticket per mile per hour flight. And that's how it
That's
works.
just sad. That's just sad. You got to tell companies not to do that, like to ram people's legs into the seat and stuff just to make an extra buck. That's kind of sad. You got to do that. Honestly, like, it's also a greed problem too. Like, I get the fact that people want to make money. Like, I totally get it. They want to try to maximize their profits, but at the same time, though, it's like, where are these people losing their humanity and things like that? Like treating people like cattle and trying to just treat people like they're just numbers and stuff. It's like, that's kind of lame.
Yeah, it is really lame. I mean, look at that. Like this was considered standard class back in the day, this kind of seating. And it was very luxurious still. Look at the amount of room that they have, the leg room, the arm room. Like that is what we would call nowadays business class or first class on most airlines. That was standard class. As a matter of fact, airlines back then were generally classless. Everything was largely first class. Every ticket was, because of the regulation. There was no other reason to make an economy class or anything along those lines. And that's how everything used to operate back then, because, and also if it wasn't regulated, people, like, for example, on the railroads, this was a huge thing in the railroads, Matthew. This is actually crazy. The railroads were hardly regulated at the beginning, and they sat there and would literally go, oh my God, what if the government came down and regulated us? We can't have it. And so they would make sure to be on their best behavior just so that way the government would not regulate them, because they were scared of the regulation.
Yeah, before long, they'll have people sitting in people's laps, and on the airplanes and stuff. They'll have them sitting in their laps and stuff, like the Diddy airline or something like that.
Yeah, I would, like, man, you're obsessed with Diddy jokes tonight. But yeah, I mean, it's a crazy sort of thing. But just to explain really quickly, yes, regulation to some extent, when poorly implemented, can hurt people. But at the same time, regulation is a tool that can be used for the betterment of the public and also the betterment of the quality of life of the citizenry in general. So it's not something to be just discounted completely, like a lot of people would tell you in modern political propaganda, where they say, oh, overregulate everything, or no regulations, just let everything run wild. Neither of those are the answer. We have to have a nice balance of regulation where it's needed, and also give people the lax kind of room that they would need to be able to also turn a profit as well and make a tidy sum. That's what we need. That's the real way to work the country, at least in my opinion. You know, you can disagree with me if you want, but the proof is in the pudding, and people always used to say back in the day was better, and back in the day things ran a lot differently, and just to be completely frank, there was a lot more government regulation back then. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Old Warrior once again, and he puts in the 20 this time, and Old Warrior says, India is the second largest refined products exporter, 82 billion worth, a very large, and he said because they can buy cheap Russian oil and then sell the refined product to the EU, and they could supply Russia if they wanted to. And yeah, that was my point. They might try to reach out to India for that help. I think that's a good point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say they probably will do something like that, possibly, but even still, I don't know if that's going to be enough to stop the Russians bleed. And also the Russians have to buy it back, and it's going to be more expensive because the refining process, of course, has to be generally paid for, and also there has to be some profit made on top. And I think that might end up being still too expensive for the Russians, because I don't think the Indians are going to take a several tens of billions of dollar hit annually to float the Russians. I don't think they like them that much. But a big thanks to you once again. That is a good point, though. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Krish Seth, and he puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Krish, for that support. He said, LSA, and thanks for all the hard work y'all do. And if Russian oil exports were fully halted, wouldn't oil prices skyrocket globally? And that's my take, at least. And OPEC would probably need to be convinced to set price caps.
I thank you for the support, Chris Seth, and that's actually a great question. As far as oil completely being stopped, as far as the exportation from Russia, yes, that will result in an increase in the price of barrels of oil globally because of the lack of the supply that the Russians produce daily. So, yes, that would result in an increased cost. However, it's generally considered that the increased cost in the short term will have greater effects in the diplomatic long term because we'll be bankrupting the Russians and stopping the war from continuing, meaning that the Russian, whatever happens to Russia at that point, the markets can be reopened, the price of oil will drop, and we've generally at least averted the war in Ukraine or any major war in Europe from that point on. So generally, while it would cost us a decent bit up front, at least in additional oil costs, it should benefit us in the long run by forcing the Russian Federation in the war in Ukraine. So kind of like an upfront cost now for peace in the long run. So a big thanks to you once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we got a $10 super chat from Daniel McMurray, LSA, and he puts in that 10, of course. He said, "You guys are great," and LSA.
Hey, and LSA, and a massive thanks to you once again for the support and enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. And long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a $10 support from DITY Truck. And thank you very much, DITY, for that support. Sadly, I can't read the super chat, though, because for some YouTube reasons, we can't read off something that seems to advertise a company because that might cause some issues. But thank you very much for that support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. We also have a 10 from the Playmaker 1271, and they said, "Is it possible that the reason the Russian subs were in their ports is related to fuel shortages?"
Technically, most of those submarines are nuclear powered, and the Russians do have nuclear fuel refining capabilities, so they're probably not in port due to a lack of fuel. They're most likely in port due to a lack of supplies or the cost necessary to keep those vessels underway, or those boats underway, technically. So it appears that it would be more so due to the prohibitive cost of keeping a submarine at sea is the reason why they're all at port. That would be the highly likely explanation I could give, but it could be one of many others. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 New Zealand donation from Steve T. And Steve said, "Do you think this U.S. government fears Russia and will never get behind going through with any increase of the economic impact on Russia? And do you think this fear is why China, India, and Iran have become far more confident and active?"
I would have to say yes, to be entirely honest, based off of the lack of action that we've seen by the U.S. administration. I generally have to believe they are actually scared of the Russians, which I find to be a little bit odd because it's a self-defeating sort of an argument that they have because the Russians are scary. They have nukes, and they're also a big military power, but they're getting beat badly in Ukraine. And also, they're not really that big economically. They only have a $1.7 trillion economy. They're smaller than the state of Texas in terms of GDP. And on top of that, yes, they're nuclear armed, but we've been throwing tariffs at China and India left and right. And China is the second largest economy on the planet, and it also has 600 nuclear weapons. Pretty much all of those are ICBMs. So that it's like if we were scared of anyone, if we were going to, generally say, oh, I'd be scared to do something against them because they seem pretty powerful, I would actually say that'd be the Chinese more than the Russians at this point. Hell, even India. There's a better argument to say India is scarier than Russia at this point because they are also nuclear armed, although they don't have ICBMs. They have an economy that's around $3.7 trillion. The Russians, once again, only have a $1.7 trillion economy. So India is worth about 2.5 Russias in terms of economic value. So it's like, I don't know why in the world we have a fear of the Russians the way we do, rather than being in a war, because the Chinese and the Indians have far more potential to create greater problems than us if we did anything hostile against them, like the implementation of tariffs and sanctions, than the Russians ever would have the potential to do, even right now. So I would generally say yes, but I'll be honest though, I hope that the president understands that because I don't think anyone's really making that clear to him right now. China is a much bigger bear to poke with a stick than the Russians would be, and we're poking them just fine, and nothing's really happening. So why not start just beating the Russians with the stick in a hypothetical sense? I wish someone would actually start to get that across to him and tell him about that. Because I think that that's the way we ought to approach the Russians. We ought to approach the Russians from the position of absolute disrespect. The only thing that they respect is raw strength and displays of strength. That's it. Historically, that's all they care about through the Cold War and every other period. That's what we have to approach the Russians with. We can't approach them with this nice reconciliatory niceness that we have right now. They don't appreciate that. They consider that weakness. We have to approach them with the idea we will go to war as the United States of America and absolutely lay waste to Russia if they do not accept our terms right now. That's actually what they'll respect, and we'll actually get them to the negotiating table seriously on that kind of a metric and settle them down to something that will be agreeable to both sides, most likely. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support, Steve T, and helping this channel keep on running. And I hope that the president of the United States will start to understand that eventually. I think it's a trial and error sort of thing. He's going to run his head into a brick wall with the Russians a couple of more times and figure it out. Hopefully, and then we'll see, hopefully the right decisions are made at that point on how to approach the Russians in foreign policy. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $5 support from Laser314. And Laser said, once again, the goalpost for Article 5 Act gets moved about 100 yards further away.
And I would have to say, I hate that that's true. That's generally true, though. And I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Alex Burleton. And Alex said, longtime viewer, and keep up the great work, and take one from the chat.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Alex Burleton, and thank you for being a long-time viewer and a channel legend. I got to thank you greatly for that. And we will make sure to get one from the chat. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so this one is going to go to Bama FPV, who said, is Poland going to call an Article 4 meeting over the drone flight that went into their territory?
It doesn't appear that they are. We heard that there was a armed NATO provocation by the Russians, but we didn't hear of any will or intent of theirs to try and invoke an Article 4 conference or an Article 5 invocation. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in the moment. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Daniel McMurray, LSA yet again, and he said, I called that Russia will be doing crazy stuff because there's fuel shortages. All or nothing is going to be happening here real soon.
I would actually have to say that's not far off. That's probably going to push them to start conducting rash actions because the time to conduct any action is running out. When they run out of fuel, they have no way to conduct a rash action or a balanced action. They completely lack the ability to conduct any action. So I'd agree with you on that. But hopefully we'll see that the U.S. government handles the situation with surgical-like precision because it's going to require walking a very thin tightrope to be able to handle the situation properly. So with that, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Foxglow, and Foxglow puts in a 5, and thank you for that support as well. They said, can World War III be avoided at this point? And after World War III, once the conflict news is over, would you retire to watch the sunset over a grateful universe?
That's a great question, Foxglow, and honestly, I think probably if World War III broke out, we either wouldn't be alive by the end of it, or we would probably get drafted into it, even with what we're doing right now. Like they'd be like, "Get in there!" Like I'd be like, "But my spine's crooked." Get in there, and I would be in there in the fight. So, honestly, I think that's the way we would have to retire. Is folks, we got a draft notice, we've got to go. So that probably would be the case.
We're not retiring. No. We're still working. No, we just switched to GoPro footage. Then we're on the ground reporting. Then we're showing it.
At that point, folks, we're actually going to do a legit collab with CivDiv. like it's at that point, it's going to happen. But honestly, I think even after the war ended, I'd probably just get right back to news coverage because. You know, what would be well, I absolutely love doing my job on this end of just getting to yap about military stuff and history stuff every day. Why would I ever want to do anything different? This is what I originally founded the channel to do way back 4 years ago. The first videos I ever uploaded were on foreign policy and global news events. Always wanted to do this. It was always in the back of my mind. Never thought it was possible, though. I thought being a YouTuber my entire life was a pipe dream. And it turns out, as far as I know from folks that I went to school with, we're the only people, Matthew and me, who ever ended up doing it. So, and actually succeeding at it too. So, you know, why give up a dream when you actually got what you've always been really wanting but never believed was possible? So I would say that would be generally what I'd do. I'd probably just return right back to news coverage because I'm sure there'd still be stuff going on in that post-war world, a lot like there was after World War II. But with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Clank Clank, I'm a Tank, who puts in a 5. And he said, it's time to dust off the swords robots from 2005, and we have the tech, and bureaucracy is the Pentagon problem.
And I'd have to say, thank you for the support, Clink Clink. And also, the Swords Robots for 2005. Bureaucracy is a bit of the problem, but also, it's really the whole problem with how America is structured. We are structured around the modern, expensive, precision guided munition that is artisanally produced or artisanally produced, where it's produced in limited numbers and batches. We have to be of the mindset to mass produce everything at cheap costs. That's what we have to do. Generally, I think that America could do that if it came down to make or break sort of a situation. We would probably start to produce everything on an economy of scale, so it would become wildly cheap. But at the same time, we need to be ready to do that now, and we need to be ready to do it at a fraction of the cost, even in an economy of scale that we have right now, that it would end up being. And that's something that I just think that the current war industry in America and the Department of Defense is having a little bit of a hard time figuring out. Like I'll be honest, like I like the idea that the Secretary of Defense did in that little video where he's like, we're working on drones, and they were flying the drones around his head, but also at the same time to criticize the drones flying around his head cost 50 grand each. Some of them did. It's like, that's not even economically viable in a war. One of those things is lost. It's the cost of a damn Toyota Tacoma these days, like just lost in one drone. That's completely economically infeasible in a long-term war of attrition or any sort of a war where heavy losses are being seen in equipment and personnel. We just cannot have that kind of cost. We have to cut it down. And that's something I just don't think the Department of Defense or the war industry is getting at this point. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for the support, Clink Clink, I'm a Tank. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Bob Anon. And Bob puts in an 8 Australian, and thank you very much, Bob, as well, for that support. He said, have the CIA flip Putin, given no Russian leader has done more damage to Russia, demographically or militarily since the Tsar? And Bob, if you're asking if the CIA is flip Putin, I don't think they'll ever flip Putin, if you mean like bringing him over to our side. Is that what he's talking about, by the way?
I think so.
Oh, that'll never happen. Hell no. Putin is like, he is dug in like Dugan.
Also, I'd have to say that I think Stalin did more damage than Putin. Stalin, because of how World War II was handled and how the Purge was handled, is responsible, if you include everyone who died in the Soviet Union in World War II, he's responsible for about 50 million deaths. Although generally we only attribute about, I think it's something like 15 or 22 million to Stalin from the Purges. But, potato. He is still one of the worst genocidal maniacs in history. I'd say that Stalin did worse. But still, Putin is absolutely nuts. Honestly, Putin is as destructive as Stalin was. It's just only a matter of time before it catches up to Putin, unlike Stalin, where it never really caught up to him and he just died of a stroke in 1953. But a huge thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it rolling. And so a massive thanks once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Luke UK, and Luke puts in a 5. He said, loving the live streams and the short war videos and fantastic work, enforcers.
And thank you so much for enjoying our work, Luke UK, and thank you for loving our streams and the short war videos. I tried my best today, put out the first one that I had in a couple of weeks, and it looks like it actually turned out pretty decent, actually. About 150,000 people have watched it so far, and I gotta thank everyone for watching it today.
Very nice.
Very nice. I thank everyone for watching it. It's good to know that folks are enjoying my return back to short war videos. Like, literally for 2 weeks, every day that it came around to being my day to make one, there was just not enough news. I was never happy with the news. Today was a really decent day of news, and I was like, it's time to make a video, and I made it, and it didn't turn out that badly, really. It was actually shockingly good, because at the beginning of the day, I was scared. They had me in the first half, I'm not going to lie, and then it was a nice finish. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $5 support from Connor Guiatofero. And thank you very much, Connor, for that support. And hopefully I got the last name right this time. I kind of put a little spin on it. But Connor said, rest in peace to Judge Frank Caprio. And he helped so many people. And he was a great man. And whatever judge should inspire to be like him. And also rest in peace to that fellow, by the way. I heard he passed away today. He was up there in, I believe, what was it, Rhode Island, I think?
Let me go pull him up.
Yeah, but he seemed like a nice fella. He was much nicer than any judge I've ever run across in Alabama. I'll be honest. Judges in Alabama, for the most part, now there are some good ones. I'm not going to say all of them, but this individual right here, this fella right here on the screen, was much nicer than any judge I've ever seen in my personal experience. So a good guy, it seemed like, and also rest in peace to him as he did pass today, which is obviously some sad news. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, poor guy, really. Honestly, a face of the American court system, or at least a role model of the American court system with what folks were seeing out there. The guy had a great respect for the citizenry, was always looking out for their best interest with this kind of judgments and rulings, and the above and beyond due diligence that you do to try and make sure that people were in better positions than they left the court in. A very nice guy. And I got to say, it's unfortunate to hear that he passed. I heard about that earlier today, and we didn't have the chance to mention that until now. But an absolutely unfortunate thing to hear that he passed. There's actually another judge, speaking of which, who's kind of taking the reins from Frank Caprio here. I've been seeing him around on the internet from time to time. I unfortunately don't know his name. He has a different style and kind of a different energy about him, but still generally in the same spirit. And he also seems to be really taking on the face of being the next role model of the U.S. judicial system for the larger part. But still, I got to thank you for the support, and it's very unfortunate to hear that such a famous, celebrated, and very even-handed kind of a judge has passed away. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Big Papa Chester, and he puts in a 5. He said, "Hey there, and thanks for the work. And do we have any news about the U.S. response to this new nuclear arms race?"
We haven't really heard if you want to call the Golden Dome a response, possibly that might be considered a response, but we haven't heard a direct response to the nuclear arms race that is starting to develop around the world in China, India, and Russia. We haven't seen one officially yet, but I hope that someone brings that to the attention of the president, because generally, just to explain this, folks, I'm not saying that like the president's a blind, dumb idiot who can't see what's going on. It's just that a president usually has a lot going on, a whole bunch of other projects going on, all of them do. So an advisor or someone in the cabinet of the president has to go, "Mr. President, there's this new thing. What about it?" And I hope that someone in the cabinet either listens to this show so they can bring it up to the president or something like that, because this is actually starting to become a bit of an issue. Like, either we need to find some way to negotiate with all of these folks, separate of everything else going on, to institute some sort of a new SALT treaty of some sort, or some sort of a nuclear arms reduction treaty as well, to see if we can start to get the situation under control, because this isn't going to benefit anyone, and it's pretty much returning to back what we were doing during the 1950s, the 60s, and the 70s. So with that, well, really not the 70s. Nixon was actually pretty ahead of his time with the whole nuclear reduction treaties like the SALT II and all that sort of a deal. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I hope that someone will bring this to the attention of the president so this can start to become a foreign policy concern, is this new nuclear arms race that we're starting to see emerge. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. I hope that answers your question incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Paul Levchuk, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Paul, as well. He said, Polish strip clubs are absolutely off the rockers. If y'all heard back in the day, apparently there was an incident with some U.S. soldiers and some Polish women that work, apparently, that was actually brought up in a Pentagon press briefing, I think like 6 months to a year ago or something. Actually, it was actually last year in 2024, because it was the prior spokesperson that addressed it. But it was a whole thing, apparently, over there. So it sounds like it's crazy, but I wouldn't know, me personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
Me personally, I could not attest to the veracity or intensity of a Polish strip club, so I'll have to leave my comment out on that. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running, and I hope that does address that in the best I can, at least. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Kyle Padell. He said, "Take a look at Mount Scott in Oklahoma and Slava, Ukraine."
Mount Scott in Oklahoma? Why heavens, let's go take a look. I didn't know that there was a mount anywhere in Arizona. So let's take a look at Mount Scott. I'm sorry, I said Arizona. I mean Oklahoma. And it's down here in the middle of the Chickasaw Nation for the large part. Let's take a little gander at this. Oh, wow. That's actually pretty cool. It's like the Badlands, kind of.
I didn't even know there was mountains here, to be honest.
Man, this is actually crazy. Look at that.
That's really unique. I didn't even know this was like this. And this is in Oklahoma. That's crazy.
Bison. He's a bison, man.
Bison. Very dangerous creature.
They look cute, though, but they're dangerous. Like, they're very dangerous. Wow, look at this. Folks taking pictures out here, waterfalls. Really nice place, actually. I've never heard of this place before. Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And I got to tell y'all, folks, I wish I could pet a bison. The fur up here always looks very fuzzy, but they would kill me if I tried to touch them. So it's like a everlasting temptation. You want to pet the bison, but the bison will kill you, so you can't touch it. So with that, big thanks to you once again for support. Now, what the dog doing?
That dog looks like it's about to do something. What's he about to do to somebody?
Whoa, that dog looks like it's about to do something. What's it about to do?
I mean, call this dog a real canine, but he's looking like he could jump off that rock.
Bro, honestly, it looks like he's about to jump. Don't do it! But anyways, with that, a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, and thank you for sharing the Mount Scott area. Very cool. And so with that, is that near to that toxic place that's in Oklahoma where they did all of the mining? You know what I'm talking about, Matthew, where they did all of the mining, and now the place had to be abandoned because of the environmental concerns?
I mean, I'm not really sure what you're talking about, but talking about a dangerous mining pit, I'm not sure where you'd find that.
Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Like, you can see here, Sulphur, Oklahoma, Bromide, Oklahoma. There was another place named similar to this, missing the name, and it was somewhere around here, and there's loads of pits around there, and they're like leaking arsenic out into the water everywhere around there. It's completely uninhabitable. It's toxic.
Arsenic? That sounds like it could be dangerous.
I'm trying to think of it, man. It's just absolutely evading me. We've got to look at it, though, because it's really crazy looking. Someone will bring it up in the chat here in a second. But it's so bizarre, man. Like, when you see it, you'll be like, oh, my God. Like, it actually looks like it's a toxic place. Let's see. Let me just type it in. Toxic city in Oklahoma. Pitcher. It's Pitcher, Oklahoma. Let me go pull that up. Pitcher, Oklahoma. Here we are. This is Pitcher, and look at all.
I mean, don't call him a baseball fanatic, but he lives in Pitcher.
I got to be honest with you. I think they did a little bit too much pitching. I mean, look at this place. Oh, whoa, it's not that great.
Really, the whole surroundings. I mean, how can they do this to the place?
But if I remember correctly, they mined something like zinc out of this area or something like that. And it started to leak arsenic into the local water supply, which is, of course, just straight up poison. And so they had to evacuate the entire area, and I think they're in the process of demolishing it, or I think they found out they couldn't demolish it, so they just had to abandon it and leave it alone. But these giant mountains are around the area, and whenever the wind comes through, it blows off a load of the dust from these mountains, and the dust is toxic itself. So it's literally a toxic hellhole out here. It's really.
Don't they have a little bit of that in Salt Lake City too, like where they have the dust blowing off of stuff, and it's like from the slag heaps or something?
That dust is like normal dust, but they actually do say if the Great Salt Lake ever dries up, the lake bed is most likely so toxic because of all the industrial waste that was poured in there in decades prior that settled to the bottom, that if the lake dries and that lake sediment starts to get blown away by the breeze into Salt Lake City, the toxicity of that will probably start to shorten a lot of people's lifespans by decades with the amount of toxicity that'll start to be blown in.
Yeah, I think I'll probably move out when that happens.
Yeah, I think I'll be moving out well before that happens, honestly. Or hopefully they can find a way to stabilize the Great Salt Lake so that way it doesn't dry up. Like, I think that
just put a hose in it and turn it on.
Make the Great Salt Lake great again. Why not? Let's make it a nice, big, beautiful Great Salt Lake like it used to be back before the 80s. But with
pour liquid gold in the water. We gotta fix the water. Water treatment, they say. Put liquid gold in it. They said, we're gonna make that water so nice, sir, that water's gonna be something that you want to swim in all day long. I said, that's some damn good water right there. Good job, sir. That's good job.
We need to debrine the North Great Salt Lake. It's brown as shit. It looks nasty. People go up there and they smell it and they go, why does it smell like garbage? It's because it's brine shrimp. They have run over the North Salt Lake. It's absolutely terrible. You go up there, you can't handle the smell. It's really bad, and the whole lake's dead. All the fish up there, they died a long time ago. Only skeletons. South Salt Lake, somewhat better. And the railroad trestle is the only thing dividing the two. Otherwise, the North Salt Lake would kill everything in the south. Really sad. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can, because it's really sad what happened to the Great Salt Lake, really a tragedy. Go look at it, the Great Salt Lake. They talk about it all the time online, and they always say great things about the Great Salt Lake. And they say, why is it disappearing? Where is it going? Because it used to look like this.
It used to be really great.
And now it looks like this.
Shrinkage.
I was in the pool. I was in the pool. Like, man. But what a shame, really. Look at that.
Yeah, it's inflation, honestly.
Yeah, just a absolute shame. I hope that the Great Salt Lake returns to what it once was. But anyways, with that, anyways, folks, if the Great Salt Lake never returns, it's okay. Everyone's just going to gather around Utah Lake, the smaller but cleaner version of the Great Salt Lake. Y'all want to take a gander at it? Why not? Let's take a little look. Actually, that's not a good picture. Let's go find it. let's go find a better picture. That one looked like absolute garbage. How about this one? Yeah, here we are. Utah Lake.
I was out here not too long ago, actually looking right at this lake.
Well, I gotta say, it's actually not that bad looking of a lake. And then you have this place called Saratoga Springs, where
That's where I was at, actually. Right there in that parking lot, actually, I pulled into and walked out there to go see the lake.
Look at how beautiful that is, folks. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it beautiful? Look at that. They got little sailboats that they sail around the lake in. It's a
They have
pleasure.
hot springs right over there, too, like right next to it. You can go get in.
Oh, yeah, here we are. Yeah, I was looking for those, actually. The hot springs. You can get in them, wade in them. It's really cool, actually. Like, honestly, I would like to go do that one day. That seems like it'd be pretty fun. But anyways, with that, folks, I hope that does address that the best that we can. The big rabbit hole for, like, what reason, I don't even know. But it was a fun one. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a 4 from Robert Krogan. And he said, will Poland let this stand?
I think so, actually. I hate to say it, but I think they will, Robert. And so I hope that does answer that well. Thank you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a $2 support from LSA Sergeant Figment, also a $2 support from Pedal to the Metal 65, and a $2 support from Parabox, as well as a $2 support from Plazat. And also we have a 2 from Mark Andre Burnett, and also a 1 from Squirrel. And LSA Sergeant Figment, he said, smash the like button, that's an order, and long live the LSA.
Hey, and smash that like button, folks. That is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Figment. And we've actually reached 3,200 likes tonight. Isn't that amazing, folks? Isn't that incredible? I think that's wonderful. And I got to thank you all so much once again for watching so far and enjoying this channel and supporting it and helping us to keep this thing running. Because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't have been able to keep this channel running for the longest time. So big thanks to everyone who threw in their support without a comment. And a big thanks to LSA Sergeant Figment as well for being a channel legend. And so with that, folks, now that we've made it through that whole segment of the Super Chats, it's time for us to get on into the live chat questions of the night. And so, without further ado, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our Morse code decoders tonight were Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arab Garbo, Heroic Fluffiness Cush, and Kopio Terex. They said the Morse says the Russian armed forces just lost one of the 2 pockets of Pokrovsk. It's over for them, and LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all for getting that correct time and time again. I didn't change the Morse code message tonight. It was pretty much the same thing. They lost another pocket, like so. They got pushed back again. I was like, you know what? That Morse code still applies. So I was like, why even change it? So y'all got it dead on the nail again. I got to congratulate the Leasing Roman Signal Corps for getting that correct time and time again. Y'all have gotten that correct for 1,274 days of war, and hopefully we'll get it correct for the remainder of the history of this channel. So a massive thanks to y'all so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our first live chat question goes to David Tablet, and David said, would Poland have to request the invoking of Article 5, or can NATO unilaterally invoke it?
I believe that NATO would have to request the invocation of Article 5, if I'm not mistaken, on how the treaty works.
You mean Poland?
Yeah, Poland. Did I not say Poland? I thought I said
You
Poland.
said NATO would have to request NATO Article 5.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah, so Poland would have to request for NATO to invoke Article 5 for Article 5 protections. Because if I'm not mistaken, that's how it worked on 9/11, that the United States had to request that NATO invoked Article 5 over the 9/11 attack, which NATO unanimously accepted. And then we went into the war on terror as the NATO alliance instead of just the United States. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I understand, based off of the historical precedent laid out during 9/11, because it generally does appear that Poland would have to request the invocation, and NATO couldn't just do that on the behalf of Poland. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Trizetto, and Trizetto has a question about the Middle East. He said, do you think if the U.S. strikes Iran again, will we see a stronger retaliation than last time from the Iranians?
I don't really think so. I think generally their abilities to respond are running out about as quickly as they're running out of water. And I think the next time we strike them, we're going to ensure that they really don't have the ability to retaliate or strike back. And especially the Israelis are most likely going to be working on that, because that seemed to have been a bit of the failing point for them last time, where they ended up taking some hits. So I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we got a live chat from Nisa. And Nisa said, how do you both run such an amazing stream 6 days a week? And also thank you for the kind words. They said also 7 days this week, because I believe there was a special stream. And there was. It was 7 days. No days off this week. Working all the time. And they said, are you powered by the coffee? And yes, we are powered by the coffee. For me, it's a mix between cold brew and also I do have these little like caffeine tablet things every once in a while. I believe they're called Neurogum or something like that. It's like these little gum tablets with caffeine in it. And they have actually less caffeine than a cup of coffee has in it. So if I feel like I'm over buzzed or something by the cold brew, I usually go for those instead because they seem to have a little bit of a lighter effect. So tonight, it's the caffeine Neurogum things tonight. It's not the cold brew because I was feeling a little bit too buzzed out from the caffeine earlier, so I went for the lighter option. But yeah, pretty much coffee at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that it's raw cold brew. That's the only thing that keeps me running. Technically, because we ran a Monday stream, we're working 13 days straight without end. So because it's pretty much 2 weeks melded together, but we get the next Monday off. So technically, it's 13 straight days. That's kind of wild when you think about it. Like, not a lot of people out there work 6 days a week, much less 13 straight days. But some people do. But
And everybody does, man. These days, everybody's working all the time.
Day off in this economy? Forget about it.
Yeah, nobody's got days off. A lot of people working 2 and 3 jobs.
Man, honestly, man, I gotta still give a huge shout out to the Secretary of State. That poor man, like, honestly, it's a tough economy when a Hispanic man in the government's working 4 jobs. I mean, you gotta give him credit. Like, you gotta give him credit. He's got like 4 hats right now. Like, it's a crazy thing. But beyond,
he's getting 4 times the 4 times the abuse at this point.
I wonder if he gets like 4 times the pay. It's like if he's technically running 4 positions, does he get paid 4 positions worth of pay, or does he just get paid as the Secretary of State? Honestly, folks, to be honest with you, if he's got 4 department heads as his position, he ought to be getting the pay for all 4 departments. Because he's doing 4...
He probably is.
I would assume so. I would feel like that's actually appropriate in that kind of a situation. But outside of that, I would have to say that cold brew is the only thing that keeps me running. Also, sheer dedication to just keep news running day in and day out is what keeps me going on streams. I don't really have a huge, like, as big a drive to make videos. Like, I'm not someone that goes, I will die if I don't make a video. Because generally, as far as videos go, I actually like for them to be good. So I wait for news to be really good. But streams will run every day. Like, as far as videos versus streams go for me, the streams are like a bus service. They run every day and they go from point A to point B, which is the news from beginning to finish and then getting to chit chat with everyone in the question segment. Videos, on the other hand, are more so kind of like an ocean liner service these days. If it is a good fair weather kind of a thing and it looks like there's enough passengers to ride the ship will run. Every other time, the ship's at port waiting for the time where the perfect weather is there, the right amount of passengers are there, and then we can run the ship. That's generally how I run things on my end. But a big thing.
I'm setting sail on that daily video ship as much as I can. That thing's heading out all the time for me. I'm trying to make a short video all the time. But sadly, though, even on some days, I can't even make a video because sometimes the news is so low. And here's the way YouTube works, folks. A lot of people don't like understand really how this works, and you really wouldn't understand it until you actually try to like run the system. You really can't just make a video on a day that there's really not sensational news. It won't get any views. Like, as much as the video might still be good, it might report stories that are interesting, it just simply won't get the raw viewership, which is something that could make or break a video. So we have to wait for days where there is bigger news, or otherwise the video is going to flop, which actually hurts us in the algorithm. So that's something that we have to sort of work around with YouTube. It's not really the way we want to operate it. We'd like to just make a video every day and just be done with it, but we kind of have to work around the algorithm, which sort of dictates how we do it.
Well, yeah, and then the other issue is that, like, today, you know, like a drone hitting Poland, that's pretty big news. And then YouTube just, like, technically, just to be honest with y'all, they bumped our entire category down to the algorithm that we're in, so we just get promoted to less people. Like, today, the video that was made, it's gotten 150,000 views right now, and it has just, like, not to, like spew out all the analytics to y'all, I won't do all that, but it got a 13.2% click-through rate 13 hours in, which is considered above average. That's actually an incredibly good click-through rate, but that's also telling us that it didn't get promoted to a lot of people, because a lot more people saw that video. Pretty much 13 out of every 100 saw the video on their desktop and clicked on it. That's wildly good, amazingly good click-through rate, but YouTube didn't put it on a lot of people's desktop to see to click. So that tells us that that our category is getting bumped down a couple of notches right now, because YouTube thinks that other categories are something that people want to watch more, so they're promoting those more to people. So today was a big news day, and the video, by every metric, did incredibly well. But then at the same time, YouTube just isn't pushing it as much. So while it did incredibly well statistically, it just didn't get a lot of views. So all those sorts of things kind of go into play when we're making a video, because if you don't bring all those things into play and you don't work your videos around that sort of video, YouTube will punish you in the algorithm for that. So we have to kind of play the YouTube algorithm political game with that. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And we have one more super chat from Kyle Padell. Thank you, Kyle, for that $5 support. He said, look at Medicine Park in Oklahoma as well, and Slava LSA.
Let's take a look at Medicine Park in Oklahoma. Medicine Park. That's right next to Mount Scott. Wow. That is really cool.
That is cool. I like that.
Dude, I've never heard of these cool places before in Oklahoma. Look at this.
Man, Oklahoma's got it going on.
Man, Oklahoma actually does kind of have it going on. This is, like, pretty neat. That is really cool, actually. I've never heard of these places in Oklahoma. You know, there's not really a lot of places that exist like this in Alabama. But I was doing some searching, Matthew. I was actually doing a little bit of digging here in Alabama. And, you know, speaking of railroad stuff, I actually found out that there's a little artifact of something really cool that's in Birmingham. I want to go see it now, because it's like the only one I know of in the area. You know how there's that Southern Railway caboose in Irondale, like, that sits by the tracks?
Yes.
So there's actually, I was absolutely stoked to find this out, because I was researching about, like, railroad stuff around here. There is an L&N caboose at Helena right there.
Oh, wait a minute. This is at the Railroad Museum, isn't it?
Is this a railroad museum? No, this is a deli.
Oh, they just got it like a... Huh, I didn't know there's a deli across from that.
I think you're thinking about the Railroad Museum in Calera.
Oh, yeah. I think I am, yeah.
Yeah, but this is an L&N railroad caboose. I actually don't think the L&N ever used this style of caboose. I'm not really sure, because I always remember that they used, like, the bunker style that had, like, the little juts on the side, like that Southern caboose in Irondale. But maybe they did. I just don't know. But still, this is really cool. I was like, wow, it's a piece of the L&N, like, if it really is. And I was like, that is so cool. Honestly, I want to see it. Like, it's cool. And it's near a siding. Like, oh, what the hell? Where am I? Here. Just looking at this.
Did I say Goodfellas on the building?
Did it? It did. Social Club.
Goodfellas, Social Club. Damn.
Oh, okay.
I know Alabama was like that.
What's this? Buck Creek stained glass. Huh. That's interesting.
I
Anyway,
think it's a pretty neat looking place. I don't really ever go here very often, but it looks pretty neat, like, for Alabama towns.
actually, man, this has got like a little like Mayberry, like USA kind of a feel to the downtown. It's actually pretty cool looking.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I like how it has the elevation to it.
Yeah, like a little hill. But what's even neater is that it actually has a railroad siding that starts here in the town, which I think at some point they actually had an L&N railway station over here somewhere. And actually, I think it was that depot. I think they had some sidings here and everything, and that's why the caboose is there. But Pretty cool stuff. But I've never seen, folks, an LNN caboose anywhere in Alabama before. There's like some LNN stuff at the Railway Museum in Calera, but it's so run down and dilapidated you can't even really tell it's LNN anymore. But that one's kept up. I was like, wow, that's nuts, because most of the railroads around Birmingham, at least the ones that kind of run around Birmingham in a ring, they were all built by the LNN. And so there's nothing hardly left. Like, there's all of these signs around Birmingham that say the L&N Mineral Railroad, but there's like no real remainder of the real L&N around Birmingham. So that was the first thing I found online that actually existed. I was like, wow. I was like, that is so cool. I was like, neat. That is neat. Because there's another one up here, just to like explain to y'all. I see this one a lot because I'm always kind of like dropping through here. This Southern Railway caboose. And that's the only other one that I know of in the area. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping back to our live chat questions, this one goes to Michelle No, who said, do you think the drone could have been unseen due to the radar alternating materials and paints, etc., and China has been helping Russia, and do we know why it exploded?
Generally, from what we understand at the moment, based off of the investigation from the Polish Ministry of Defense, they said it was a Shahed 136 style drone. So we would generally consider that it's not stealth due to the geometry of the fuselage not allowing for a low radar cross section. Also, we would generally assume, at least at the moment, based off of the investigation and the details that have been released so far to the public, that China has not helped the Russians to create a stealth kamikaze drone, as we have not gotten any reports from the Ukrainians that such a drone has been used. Also, at least for the drones, it would be a redundant sort of application to make them stealth, because they only fly at an altitude of about 1,000 feet, and generally they are detected by sound and sight in the night with spotlights, and then engaged with heavy machine gun fire, meaning that radar cross sections wouldn't really play too much in the ability to evade Ukrainian air defense, as the Ukrainian air defense, at least in that particular instance, isn't necessarily radar guided. It's more so guided by a system of iPhones that have been set up throughout the country with their microphones on endlessly to listen for the sound of drones, and then they triangulate exactly where those drones are based off of the sound off of each microphone, and then they get an air defense crew out there with a spotlight to visually spot the drone in the sky, and then they engage it with a machine gun and shoot it down. So the stealth coating or some sort of stealth geometry to the fuselage would not really benefit in that kind of a scenario. But I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Pixel Lord M, and they said, what can that IRBM hit with that 5,000 kilometer range? And I can imagine it's developed to use primarily against China, as I doubt there's any issues hitting Pakistan by India.
Generally, that specific Agni 5 missile is actually got enough range to hit the entirety of the People's Republic of China, and it can also reach as far as Germany in range. So it can generally hit anything within this larger region around India, either inside the Indian Ocean, the People's Republic of China, or anywhere within Europe or the Middle East. So generally, it's able to protect India from most of its prevalent threats on the regional level, from what I know. But generally made to counter the Chinese, like you're saying. That's definitely the purpose for that, and also the Pakistanis, although the Pakistanis can be dealt with in the larger part by short-range ballistic missiles. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we have reached the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Coder for Liberty. He said, where is Russia's oil reserve even stored? Because every time I see a story about the U.S. reserve, they show a specific facility, and those reserves aren't stored in one place in Russia, are they?
Generally, strategic fuel reserves are actually strategically placed around the country, from what I would understand. And let me go make sure, let's see, U.S. strategic fuel reserve. Let's see here. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Let's see here. Okay, so it looks. Let's learn more. Okay, so. So there's 4 of them, according to the Department of Energy, but they're all in Louisiana and Texas, at Bryan Mound, Big Hill, West Hackberry, and Bayou Choctaw. Those are the only 4 strategic fuel reserve locations in America, and it's specifically
that makes it easy for the enemy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's see here. 60. The SPR comprises 60 salt caverns, Each cavern is cylindrical in shape with an average diameter of 200 feet and a height of 2,550 feet, which is large enough for Chicago's Willis Tower to fit in. But that is nuts. Oh, I'm going to have to do some more research on this. This is interesting. But from what I would know, from what I'd be able to tell you, it generally appears that they're all kind of located in one place. But let's see here. In the event of an oil supply disruption, the United States can turn these emergency stockpiles of crude oil, so it's not even refined fuel, it's actually crude, are used to combat the potential market effects of both domestic and international disruptions caused by weather, natural disasters, labor strikes, technical failures, accidents, and the political disputes or conflicts. The United States can also fill the SPR during times of demand, destruction, or oversupply to reduce shut-ins of U.S. oil production. So this is, I'm going to be honest with you folks, I'm actually going to have to do some research on this because this is deeply fascinating just from a quick read over. And apparently it was only created during the oil crisis of the 70s by President Ford. So very interesting stuff, honestly.
Russia wishes they had that much.
I know, honestly. Let's go pull up Russian strategic fuel reserves. And let's see if we can find an answer for the locations. So let's see here. That doesn't tell us anything. We need to find... So this is only showing us the gas and oil pipelines. It's not showing us their strategic reserve locations, although I'm sure we could find them. And I wonder if we can.
It's probably close to the refineries, I'd imagine. Kind of like ours are close to our refineries down there in the Louisiana area where all the major like petroleum companies operate from. It's probably close to them.
Yeah, it probably is. But then that means that the Ukrainians have probably hit a lot of those reserves because we've seen a lot of storage facilities getting hit. And that could have been the case. I think if I had to give you an answer, let's see, exist in Eastern Siberia, reserves available for the time, production, reserve estimates. It doesn't appear that there's a specific location given for the Russians. So I think it's actually spread out throughout the country in smaller distribution centers near to the refineries instead of a more centralized setup that we have where it's all based around the coast of Louisiana and Texas. I wonder if we could find one of those. Like, how big are they? Let's see. U.S. Strategic Fuel Reserve. This is running the stream a little bit over time, but this is so interesting. I feel like it's worth it at this point. Big Hill. So one of them is Big Hill, which is somewhere up here. Well, let me type that in. Big Hill. Strategic Petroleum Reserve Site. So it's right here. What? Wait a minute. What in the world? Oh, hold up. So I think they explained this. Located in Washington for carrying day-to-day operations managed in New Orleans. So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, this is something that's interesting to me, Matthew. Listen to this. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve comprises 60 salt caverns. Each cavern is cylindrical in shape with an average diameter of about 200 feet and a height of 2,550 feet, which is large enough for Chicago's Willis Tower, or the Sears Tower as it used to be called, to fit inside with room to spare. With an authorized storage capacity of up to 713.5 million barrels as of March 1st, 2025, the SPR currently holds just about 402 million barrels of crude oil. That amount of crude oil refined into gasoline can fill the gas tanks of about 590 million large sedans.
Damn. But it has to be refined, though, because it says crude.
Yeah, it's crude apparently. Like they don't have refined fuel on the tap. You still have to refine it. So this is like basic raw material storage instead of refined fuel storage, which I actually always thought it was refined fuel storage. Apparently that's not the case. Also, what the hell is a salt cavern? Like that's my question. 60 salt cavern. Well, let's go pull it up. Salt caverns.
It seems like it's got to be crude because if it's a salt cavern, it seems like it could get contaminated if it was refined.
This is wild. So apparently it's just a giant cavern underground that they pump it into and they keep it there until they need it.
Huh, that's pretty fascinating, unique actually. I guess it's naturally protected then.
That's bizarre. Like, honestly, I'm not really understanding the concept around this. I'm going to have to do some more research. I might be stating this wrong. But they just found these giant caverns underground in apparently a salt deposit. They just filled them with oil, and whenever we need oil, we take some out, and then whenever we need to refill them, we just pump more oil into them. This is a bizarre sort of a concept. I did not think it was that archaic that we literally store the crap in caves, and then we just yank it out whenever we need it. That sounds ancient, really, but that's really cool that the whole system works like that. But anyways, with that, I hope that answers the question somewhat well. I'm actually learning a lot at the same time that I'm reading it off to you. But really cool stuff. I'm actually very interested in this now. The U.S. Department of Energy is a really cool machine. They actually are also the ones in charge of the nuclear weapons in the country. It's not the military. It's the Department of Energy. That's where the real power is. It's in the energy sector. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to round this stream out tonight. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching. I hope you all have enjoyed a great deal. And if you all have, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon. The link is in the description below. And I got to thank you all so much once again for watching once more tonight, because there was a peak viewership of 11.3 thousand people, and 86,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. And so, huge thanks to all of you all so much once again. And we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, a big shout out to the 100,000 people or so, or about 90,000 actually, that joined us by the end of the stream. And we will be seeing all of you tomorrow night at the 10 p.m. Eastern stream again tomorrow night on Thursday. And also, if there is enough news for a short war video, you'll be hearing from me tomorrow midday for that short war video. So in the meantime, folks, thank you all for joining us once again. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
To God.